Special Operations, Covert Ops, Espionage, The Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 241? 242 of The Team House. I'm Jack, here with Dave, and our guest on tonight's show is Brad Thomas. Brad served in the Ranger Regiment in Army Special Operations, had a long career there, and now he plays in a band called Silence and Light. We're really excited to have you on the show, man. Thank you for coming in studio today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And great meeting you, Dave. We haven't met, but I was informed you were rocking the shirt, and people were screenshotting that and sending it to me. And I'm like, I don't know who this guy is, but let's figure it out.
Always happy to support the band, man.
It's
great. You guys have a great band, and then knowing your background makes it even cooler. So
yeah, appreciate it. It's funny because I think a lot of people hear the music, and they're expecting it to be like super JV,
right.
And they hear it and they're like, man, you're actually really good. Like, this is actually good music.
Yeah, it's not your friend's band that you have to go support. Like, it's great music. Yeah,
there's a lot of that too, though. There's a lot of that too. But yeah, no, I appreciate you guys having me on. Jack and I met, I think, way back 2011, maybe even 2010,
something like that.
And I helped do an article about the Ranger Recon Detachment and how it started to shift from the time that I originally got there in like 95 through the time that I left there in 98. So it was a ton of fun.
I'd love to revisit that subject sometime, because what RRD starting like 84, somewhere around there?
I think so. I think it stood up the same time that 375 stood up and RHQ stood up. I think
that would make sense after Grenada.
And I think it was called, I remember it being called the Colt Team, and Colt Team was like something, it was more about
like close observation.
Yeah, it was like halo in and drop bombs kind of.
Yeah, the concept was like, haloing in behind enemy lines and lasing targets.
Yeah.
The Colt teams were like a special team. But yeah, I would love to revisit that topic at some point, because it's a cool history. And then obviously they've gone on to do so much else. The last 20 years has been wild. But yeah, no, that stuff's super fun to write about.
Yeah. I think it's one of those, when people ask about the time that I served, there are a couple of things that stand out to me. And I don't know if you guys have the same kind of, when you look back, at however long you served. For me, 20 years, when I look back at the first 18 months that I was in the Rangers, it feels like that period of time was 8 years long.
It was the longest
It was just so grueling and demanding and having to prove yourself and everything else. It feels like of the chunk, and then I start comparing that amount of time with other places that I served and how much time I was on the same team with the same 4 guys for 5 years, And you're thinking, man, this was just a blip. Like, I served on one team longer than I spent in B Company 3rd Ranger Battalion.
Right.
And anyway, it's crazy. So I think, and I'd be interested in hearing your take on this, but I feel like your brain's still developing. When I got there, I was 21, just turned 22. And, your brain is still in development. And so really that time becomes, you're impressionable. It becomes a part of who you are, and not like later in my career where, we were talking about this earlier, but I'm not moldable clay anymore.
Right.
I am who I am, and I either do the job that you want me to do or I don't. But
right.
I'd be curious on your
I feel like it's also part of it is that it is the biggest culture shift that you have in your life.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, when you've been in the military for, a longer period of time, your duties may differ, and you may be given more responsibility or things like that, but you're already part of that culture, so it's sort of just more of course corrections or whatever, where when you go from, whether it's high school or college or, from like me, just from the street, from my, place on the street to, to enlisting, that like it's a big deal, like it's a big thing. And,
Sure.
And, and yeah, you
There's like definitely like a trajectory too, and like you can read war memoirs going back as far as you want, 50, 60, 70 years ago, and it's like when the guy first shows up, like, oh man, this is awesome, this is the shit, we're awesome. They get to by the end of their career and they're like jaded. Oh, it's all political now, bro. Everything's different now. It's not what it used to be.
It's not hard like it
but
used to
if
be.
you think about it, like there's some kid right now in 2023 out there in Ranger Battalion, like this is his time, man.
Yeah.
This is the heat right now, right at this moment. It's a big deal for him,
experiencing the same thing
Yeah,
the first time. So,
yeah, exactly.
So that's one of the things that stands out is looking back, that period of time just seems like it was forever long. And the other thing that stands out is, people will say, oh, when you got to Delta, it must have been, amazing. It must have been great, whatever. And it was. But it's not the same type of environment where when I was in the Recon Detachment, we had to do everything ourselves.
Right.
Nothing was taken care of for you.
Right.
So, hey, as an E6, plan a waterborne training trip for 2 weeks down at Tyndall Air Force Base. I'm coordinating with air crews and doing that. What kind of training are we going to be doing? And I don't know, there was a part of it that you owned it. You owned the whole thing.
right.
And not just, hey, here's your stuff. It's
your
all
per
there.
diem.
Go out. And,
Yeah, your fat sack
go
of
out
per
and
diem,
do it. So that was, I felt like, one of the best kept secrets in the Army. It was a small group of, NCOs. We were all, first name basis. While I was there, we got to grow our hair out and go from high and tights to, Army standard.
Which was really popular in the regiment.
Oh yeah,
They really loved that.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
Especially when idiots like me like to push the standards.
Right.
We're like, we can't just have an Army standard haircut. We have to look like really like civilians.
Right.
But yeah, that was a great time.
Brad, what was it like? What was your origin story in terms of like when did you start looking at the military as a life for you?
So there's the answer that I would have given you in 1990 when I joined, and then there's an answer that I would give you, having perspective and looking back, and kind of recognizing the things that influenced me. My dad, PhD doctor, and grew up fairly well off, great family, no trauma and all of that, and I'm super appreciative of my childhood and everything that I had. My dad, for excitement and thrills, worked as a volunteer fire captain. And so every Saturday, Sunday, he drug me to the firehouse, and I got to see him and his buddies, kind of tooling around with one another, and they all had nicknames. And there was this camaraderie. And this is something that, this is my answer in 2023. I wouldn't have told you this, in 1990 when I joined, but seeing that, I wanted to do that. Emergency was a huge show on TV at the time, and definitely had an impact on me. And I wanted to grow up, be a fireman, run fire calls, running to burning houses and all of that stuff. And so those are some of my earliest memories. 5 years of age, I think my parents took me to my first concert, may have been 6, which was Barry Manilow.
Nice.
And when I saw that, it was kind of like, yeah, fuck all that fire department shit. Like, I want to do this. This is what I want to do. I want to entertain people. And so they ended up buying a piano under the conditions that I take piano lessons and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so I think that seeing my dad and that kind of camaraderie between, his teammates was really the thing that inspired me. When it came time, graduating high school, I'm getting ready to go to college. I was a classical guitar major, which, by the way, doesn't buy you anything in the world or get you anything in the world. By the time I got there, I went to the fire department where he worked and was like, what do I need to do? I'll volunteer. I'll take fire science classes, at college. I'll do whatever. And they're like, hey, we're not really hiring. So it kind of left me in a spot where I'm playing music, I'm playing in band, trying to make that thing happen. And it just kind of, ran its course over a couple years, and that was it. And at some point, a buddy of mine was in the Air Force as an EOD guy and was home from basic training in AIT and on Christmas leave. And he was telling me about these guys that jumped in behind enemy lines to rescue down pilots. And they came recruiting at the end of his basic. And I was like, it kind of just, the spidey senses started to tingle a little bit. And that was really where it started,
And so, what made you go the route of like Army as opposed to Air Force pararescue or something like that?
So I actually went to the Air Force and went to the Air Force recruiter and said, I want the right to try for this unit. Mm-hmm. And the guy lied to me flat out and was like, yeah, I can get you a contract and I can do all this. And he couldn't. And I ended up signing, and was going there every week to say, when's my contract? He basically told me, if you sign, I'll get you a contract. So I signed, no contract. And I'm like, all right, what's going on? I'm leaving there one day, and the Army recruiter was like, hey, man.
Those low-down recruiters, right?
He goes, what's going on? What are you doing here? And I said, well, he won't give me a contract for what I want to do. And he goes, what do you want to do? I want to be in Delta Force. And the dude just cracked up and he's like, well, you can't do that. You got to do something first, like Special Forces. And I go, okay, I'll do that. And he goes, well, you can't do that either. You got to do something before that, like a Ranger. And I go, okay, I'll do that. And he goes, I can get you a contract for that today. And so that's literally how the Ranger thing came to be. I had read, like we were talking earlier, I had read some, Vietnam era books, CIA in Vietnam, Rangers in Vietnam, that, those types of things. But it wasn't like a huge interest, it was just kind of something that I read and at the time, But anyway, so when the Ranger thing happened, so then he gets a VCR tape out, puts it in, sit down and watch this. This is what Rangers do. And it was a film about Ranger School. Had nothing to do with like the Ranger Regiment.
I'm pretty sure they showed me the exact same video in like 2000.
I want to say we have the video over there on the shelf, don't we? Yeah.
Were the guys doing push-ups wearing a rucksack?
Yeah, probably that. There was a live fire in desert phase. They showed that. They showed daylight jumps out of like a 141. It was just all Ranger School swamp stuff, and I thought, okay, this is cool. Yeah, I'll do this.
Yeah.
No idea what I'm getting into. So it's interesting. I'll have these kids hit me up on social media, and they're like, what did you do to prepare? And I'm like, yeah, not a fucking thing, man.
I watched the video.
Smoke cigarettes and drink beer.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything to prepare. So anyway.
There's something to be said for preparation, but I also think that, like, because there's so much information out there right now that kids tend to get, like, overloaded, and they think there's some magical formula that they need to hit, like, these multi-ordinal points in order to be ready for, any type of selection. It's like, yeah, be fit if you can be fit, but beyond that,
Well, there's in my mind, there's a tangible selection, and then there's the intangible stuff. Mm-hmm. And something I got to experience recently with my youngest son, who went down the road of, hey, I want to follow in your footsteps and do that. And I was like, hey, statistically, chances are pretty slim. The attrition rate's pretty high. So it's one of the things that I tried to instill in him was, it's one thing to say, well, how many push-ups do I need to do? How many sit-ups, pull-ups, all that stuff. But then there's this thing that happens where it's like, you're getting smoked the night before. you're up at 4 because your squad is, got detailed to go do ammo, whatever. And then you're doing that. And then you're going into the PT test, not fresh. It's not like everybody's getting this clean shot at something. You have how you fit in with your peer group. And some selection courses use peer evals, some don't. Some matter, some don't, whatever it might be. But, that's something that's like those things aren't a standard, not getting hurt or being hurt and going all the way through something with torn cartilage in your knee or something like that. There are just so many things that are intangible that aren't a standard. It's not black and white. It's very ambiguous.
Yeah. And there's also something about, if you look at SEALs and the amount of swimming they have to do, there are guys in, regiment or SF or wherever who are tough dudes and can do anything. They just can't do that. And then you have SEALs who are phenomenal, well-rounded athletes and everything else like that, but wouldn't be able to handle the miles under a ruck, that if they had gone another way on either side, they may not, just because of the specificity of what it takes on the body for those two types of events.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the mental aspect of all of that is the biggest key. Like, you can't be a dud physically and expect to roll in and ace everything and it's all good because I got it up here. Right. There's a balance to that. And I feel like so much of it comes from mental, and not even, I don't think, toughness. The thing that fed me was guys quitting. Yeah. And I remember thinking, like, the Ranger cadre showed up at airborne school, and it was like this screaming match that happened, and people were like literally like frozen, paralyzed. And we throw all our bags on the truck, and everybody starts to climb on, and they get the fuck off the truck. Like, you're not riding on the truck, your bags are riding on the truck. And the truck takes off, and we run behind the truck up to the RIP barracks. And there were already probably, if there were 60 people in formation, there were probably 20 that quit right on the spot. Yeah. And dude just kind of like barrel chesting his way through the formation. Who wants to quit? 10, 9, 8, 7, 7. Hands just flying. And they're like, it's not that bad. Like, we haven't even started yet. Right. So once the actual standards and testing of that started, and you start to see people, quit or not make it, that definitely gave me energy. Right. It was kind of like, well, it's not that bad yet for me, Right. I don't know.
It was always interesting to me, people who quit after events or before events. It's like I understand if, like, during an event, like, you're just like, your balls are dragging and you're just dog tired, and you're like, okay, I can't deal. But they wouldn't. They would get all the way through the event. Right? They get all the way through the event.
I'm done.
And then then the Ranger cadre or whoever would, like, light a fire and go, okay, if you want to quit, you can come sit by this fire, get nice and warm. Like, if you want to quit, it's like you just made it, like, through this, like, ball busting road march. Yeah. The psychology of it is very interesting.
And I think that you mentioned the amount of information that's out there now is pretty phenomenal. I haven't Googled it. Like, I haven't Googled Ranger selection, RASP or any of that. And recently found out, and maybe you guys know this, but there's like this whole RASP RIP argument online.
Oh no, there is?
Yeah.
And there's some beef?
Like, you ain't shit unless you, RIP. Like, RIP guys, RASP, Yeah, there's a whole thing about that, which I found kind of entertaining.
In RASP, it's like 8 weeks, I believe. And I mean, like, they get way, way more training than any of us did. Like, it seems like the standards are higher, much higher than they were when we went through.
Yeah, I don't even know. I don't know all the standards and what they are, but they kind of front load, from what I do know, they front load all of those things. So once they get a kid through that passes all the prerequisites, then it's more about training them,
Right.
which is probably a product of GWAT,
Right.
where
It is. Yeah.
hey, we're just smoking these guys for 3 weeks and they can hang, but then they show up and they don't know anything, and then they're on a plane, going overseas to deploy, and they have no skills at all,
Right.
except for I won't quit.
Right. Right.
So, but anyway, yeah, it's a whole conversation on.
I didn't know
The-
I didn't know there was actually like RIP essentialists that are like the ride or die for RIP.
Yeah.
I mean, it was good, but I mean, times change and evolve, and
Yeah.
guys are getting better training now.
I mean, it's probably very similar to the argument when Ranger School dropped Desert Phase, like that. Oh, you didn't do Desert Phase, you didn't do Ranger.
did
you ain't
either of you
shit.
go
Yeah.
through Desert Phase?
I did not.
I did.
You did?
I did not.
Yeah, I did actually 3 times. Yeah, 3 times in Desert Phase. But so this is even to prove the point even further. I didn't go through in Dugway. And Dugway was the hard desert phase. Like Fort Bliss was nothing, even though
You got over.
I think
you
it
got
was like
over Brad.
originally Bliss, and then they moved it to Dugway, and they moved it back and forth a couple times. But for all the guys that were senior to me in my platoon, they had gone to Dugway, and that was the hard one. It snowed every day, and even in the summer, and
Right.
all that stuff.
Like 8 feet of snow.
Yeah, but I did Darby, Desert, Darby, Desert, Mountains, Florida. That was my Ranger School trajectory.
Well, I mean, you must have been good at Ranger School by then.
Yeah.
Bro, I went to Ranger School I was an E2 when they sent me. They had to promote me to E3, I think, just so I could go. And yeah, I did Darby a couple times. Little extended training stay there. Did Christmas Exodus at Ranger School.
Nice.
Yeah. Good
So
times.
I had a golden opportunity. I got to B Company 3rd Ranger Battalion in April of 91. And when I got there, I was the 12th guy in my squad. So there were 11 dudes more senior than me, and the majority of them privates. By September, we were going through, and I don't know if you remember these or if they called them the same things, but it was like platoon XTEVs,
Like
squad
XFLs.
XTEV.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was like all we did was patrol
Yeah.
Monday through Friday, and it was miserable.
Yeah.
And it went from May through September. So absolutely an ass kicker physically and in the heat of the Fort Benning summer. And anyway, so by September, I'm the 4th guy in my squad. There's a squad leader, 2 team leaders, and me. Everybody else was gone, either guys that gotten hurt or they had quit or DUI or whatever. I was the only one that passed our platoon pre-ranger PT test, and they're like, all right, Thomas, you got the golden opportunity here. You've been here 5 months and you're going to Ranger School. And I had no clue what I was doing.
Yeah. No.
Zero clue.
I was in the same boat.
I was in E2. They sent me. And when I got to Ranger School, there was guys from my platoon, NCOs that had gotten DUIs that were there. And they're like, what the fuck are you doing here? Like, you shouldn't be here yet. And kind of called me out on stuff. And they had a field day with me. And yeah, it made for a miserable, absolutely miserable experience. So I was telling my son that story, and he was like, man, aren't you like angry about how things turned out and you had to do so much extra time? And, I basically failed it, and, there was no guarantee that I would stay in the regiment and what was going to happen if, who knows? And interestingly, it was kind of like everything in my life after that would have been different had that event not happened.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Like, nothing would be the same.
Yeah.
So these things have this much greater impact than I think we can even recognize when it happens.
Yeah.
So although it was a failure and it was something, everything that came after that, I wouldn't have been in Mogadishu the same way. That
Yeah.
would have been that would have been different. Everything would have been different, you know?
It's a character building experience.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Let me give a shout out to our sponsor for the show tonight. It is Magic Mind. Magic Mind is a product that you can add to your coffee, soft drink, whatever you prefer. It gives mental energy and focus. It improves your coffee, lets you drink less coffee if that's what you want to do. It makes you more productive and more focused. You can get more done in less time. It allows you to sleep better because it's not heavy on the caffeine. And it'll give you less stress and anxiety. So it'll help you be more creative. And it also helps with your memory. So these are all natural ingredients in this product that you can add to, whatever soft drink or coffee or whatever it is that you like to drink. And you can go and check them out right now at magicmind.com/teamhouse. And you can use the code TEAMHOUSE at checkout. It will give you 56% off your subscription for the next 10 days. So if you go check them out, it's magicmind.com/teamhouse. And when you check out, use the code TEAMHOUSE, and it'll give you 56% off your subscription for the next 10 days. So please go check them out. Support the sponsor of our show. Allows us to keep doing this. And thank you, guys.
Don't confuse that with Magic Mike, which is a totally different sponsor.
Yes. I believe Jack has worked in the Magic Mike.
I got the cheetah spot banana hammock ready to go. You guys, I'll dance up on this coffee table for you guys if you need me to.
No, we all belong to your OnlyFans. We
You're already subscribed.
We know what it looks like.
Good.
We know what it looks like. So, how did that work for you? What were you recycled each time, or did you go back to battalion in between?
So I did Darby Desert, and I begged my last patrol in desert phase. A guy wandered off. We were doing a split platoon, split squad type thing. Wasn't with my element, but dude wandered off in the desert and was lost for 4 or 5 hours. And I got a no-go for that, and, rightfully so, whatever. I begged for a day one recycle, and I remember going into the, company commander at the time and asking him. I also got graded twice by the same RI, which was supposed to be not allowed, and I never saw the guy give a go my whole time there, so I'm not going to say, I did see him later in life in Fayetteville, North Carolina, selling mattresses in Sears. And I was going to go up to him and ask him how life was working out for him, but I didn't.
My RI in mountains who no-go'd me, and again, rightfully so, ended up being a NCO on the scuba team down the hall from me in 5th group. he's a really good guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't, there's no grudges or anything like that.
No,
like,
not
whatever, at all. You're doing a job, and if you saw me, a certain way, cool, whatever. But begged them for a day one recycle, and they're like, no, you're going back. So I went back to B Company for maybe 6-8 weeks, something like that, and then went right back. They sent me back to Pre-Ranger and then went back through. But that was talk about a low point, But just thankful for the opportunity to be able to go back, and probably wouldn't have worked out that way if we were still at the same strength we were when I got there.
Yeah.
I would have gotten bounced down the road for sure.
I'll say, and I don't know about SF because I've never been to SFAS, but I'll say one thing about Ranger School is that there are a lot of guys who do get screwed over. Like there are the guardians of the tab there for sure who, if they take a disliking to somebody, it's very hard for them to overcome that sometimes.
Yeah. So I got, when you're gaming everything, and you're getting G2 from a guy that recycled and information from people, and half of it's bullshit, half of it isn't. And I remember from Pre-Ranger showing up at Ranger School, and they were like, stand behind each other in a row because they break down the companies, then that way you'll all be in the same company together. So we did that, and me and all my pre-ranger homies, and I'm in a row of 11 guys, all from the same pre-ranger class. We all know each other, and they start breaking down what company's what. I'm in A company, and formation is complete. They're like, all right, march back to your company areas, and here comes my platoon sergeant from B company 375, who's now an RI out there. Whoa, 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 whoa. Where's Thomas from B company? I'm like, false motivation. And he calls me out. He goes, you're in C company now. Move your stuff down there. So I pull my stuff out of formation, and now I'm in with guys I have no idea, don't know any of them. And I get down there. We get in formation. They're assigning, okay, who here is E8? Who here is E7? Who here is E6? And they're assigning squad leaders and everything else.
Ranger School. That's hardcore.
So they made me the company first sergeant as an E2. I don't know how to march a company to the chow hall. I don't know how to do any of this stuff. And they just started pulling pranks on me. And it was miserable, and it definitely affected, you think my peers thought I was doing a good job.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
Yeah.
As an example, they call me in, the TAC calls me in to his office, and he says, hey, First Sergeant, I started in December, 1 December. Hey, we need 5 people from the company to stay back from Christmas leave. Go ahead and go through those leave forms and pick who you want to stay.
Oh my God.
And I'm like,
it's like Lord of the Flies, man.
Yeah.
So I go, well, I'll be one of them, and then I randomly pick 4 leave forms out of the stack. And the dude just grabs the leave forms and he walks out into formation. He goes, all right, so-and-so, 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 so-and-so. Your first sergeant picked you to stay back from Christmas Exodus to do details here.
God.
Holy shit.
It was just stuff like that. And one day I signed 18 major minuses, which for failure to inspect because cat eyes were crooked on rucksacks. So while everybody in the company is sitting in the bleachers getting a class on how to do an ambush, I'm going through the rucksack formation, where everybody's grounded their gear. And those cat eyes are fucked up. Those are jacked up. Here, sign another major minus, sign another major minus. So I got 18 major minuses. And then at the end of the phase, I was like, there's no way I'm going on, because you can't have like 1 major minus. You're not going on.
Right.
And at the end of the phase, I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm recycling Darby. This is going to be great. And they're like, we're going to take a chance on you and send you to desert phase. And it was like, okay, awesome. I'm having a great time. So that whole thing just kind of drug with me to the next phase, and then recycled, and whatever. So it's life,
I mean, it's amazing though that you kept your spirits up enough to 5 months later, or I mean 6 or 8 weeks later, like go back and like.
Yeah, I think too, it's like, it's survival.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, I have to pass this school to be in the Ranger Regiment further than being a private.
Right.
So it's the only thing I can do. Like, there are no other options.
Yeah.
It's a one-way trip.
Yeah. The other thing that I've talked to my son about is the other intangible parts of any selection process: timing and luck. Mm-hmm. And you can't do any, no matter how much skill you have, if timing and luck don't line up and aren't on your side, you're not going to pass.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was a huge thing. So
Yeah.
I feel like it probably worked out for the better. I probably learned a lot more. I probably got to meet, and I did get to meet a lot of other guys. There's one dude, my second time through, he and I met we were in different platoons in B company, but we're still friends. And still go down to Benning together all the time, and go kick around the old barracks and do all that kind of stuff. But yeah,
that's awesome. So, how long had you been back from Ranger School until you guys until Mogadishu happened?
So graduated I should have graduated February '91, and then ended up, I think I was back in like March. I think that summer I went to pre-ranger, so it was like in July I went to pre-ranger, and then started in maybe August and graduated in November. So I went straight through the second time. And I didn't have any, like, zero issues. The second time through was in a different company. And in fact, the guy that was pulling all the shenanigans on me when I got there, the guy that had been my platoon sergeant in B company, like, apologized. And he was like, "Hey man, we were just having fun with you. Like, we didn't think it was gonna be this whole thing, and whatever." But went right through. So graduated in November of '92. Had torn cartilage in my knee and went all the way through with a jacked up knee. Got back, got my knee scoped, kind of recovered from that, and that's about when we were going on the JRX in Texas, which is where we got sent to go do the train up for Mogadishu from there. So the timeline was pretty quick.
And how large, because you had mentioned that one of the reasons you went to Ranger School and then got sent back was because your platoon wasn't up to strength. Had they filled that out by the time like you guys were ready?
No, we were still, maybe I think 5 guys in my squad, 6 guys, and they had, moved some people around from different platoons, but that was kind of across the board. The company went from, I think Panama had happened, and a lot of people saw that. There was a huge push from Desert Storm. So, when I joined in 90, I joined in May of 90. We can't get you to basic training until November. That was like, there was no way they could get me there any faster. Don't tell them you did drugs.
Right.
Like, you can't talk about any of the not taking you. And the Army was very selective. They almost didn't take me because I was allergic to milk when I was a kid, and that was this huge like waiver. Had to go have doctors write all kinds of notes and say, it wasn't going to affect me, blah 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 blah. So I think the Desert Storm push was where. So when I showed up to RIP, as an example, in RIP holdover, we had bunk cots. I've never seen them before, and I've never seen them since. But we were in a 4-man room. And so there's, 8 dudes in bunk beds, and then there were 2 bunk cots in the middle of the room, and just jammed full. So we started with like 300, 300 whatever, and finished with like 70.
Wow.
And that was my RIP class.
Wow.
So
I've never heard of bunk cots before.
Me neither.
yeah, a ton of fun.
I bet. I bet.
Ton of fun living out of a D-bag. That's why I picked 375 to go. Because I was like, I don't feel like packing this D-bag and moving anywhere else. Like, I'll walk right over there. I can see the 375.
Oh, so getting sent to
barracks from there.
375 wasn't punishment for something you did?
No.
Oh, interesting. So what was the workup to like, did you know what was going, did you know what was going on in Mogadishu? Was there like this awareness in the country, in the military for you guys?
No, zero of that. I remember being a little kid and seeing something on 60 Minutes. This must have been in like the early 80s, maybe late 70s, and there was something about Somalia. And so I remember hearing, and knowing kind of roughly where it was on the continent, but there was nothing, which is sparked a lot of conversations about somebody in the Ranger Regiment knew more than, and I've found out a ton of interesting information. For example, First Bat did a whole train up during the summer of '93 to go do that mission. But like, that word never got to us at 175. And I don't even think that they knew that they were training up for something. I think
I've heard weird stuff like that they had guys training up for Haiti, and nobody understood what they were training up for until after it almost happened.
Yeah. So interesting on that. I've also heard another story from a guy who was like RIP cadre or pre-Ranger cadre, I think, when I went through RIP, but he was like, his name was kind of famous for being one of those guys, you know, legend dude, JB Spizo. And he told me a story about from 275 that they jumped into downtown Mogadishu, did a show of force, walked through the city, walked to the airfield, got on a plane and flew away.
What?
In 1984. And it's a true story. You can actually Google it and find it.
Holy shit.
And I was like mind blown when I heard that.
Yeah.
Like, you got to be kidding me.
In 84.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, never knew it. So anyway, to answer the question a little further, we had no idea, hadn't heard anything about anything. At some point during the JRX, and I think we were there like almost a month in total. It may have been 3 weeks. I don't remember exactly, but at some point, leadership, pulled all of us into the tent, the command tent, and was like, all right, here's the deal. There's something going on. We've been providing aid, to this country, and the warlords are fighting, and they're stealing the aid, and they're killing UN, peacekeepers, and there are some Americans that have been killed, and the president wants to potentially go do this thing. And so that was kind of it. It was just kind of like hey, there's something up. And a couple of days went by. It could have been the next day. I don't remember, but it turned into, hey, we're going to go do this and going to go do this train up and be prepared to go do it, which still didn't mean we're going to go.
Right.
It was just more like, or we're going to be more prepared to go.
Stand by.
If the word comes. Yeah, and that's kind of the way it rolled out.
That's interesting. So what was a train up like for Somalia? Did you have area experts come in? Was it mostly just everybody? Was it more like a training exercise in terms of like area non-dependent training, or?
Yeah, we didn't get any like detailed information. I don't remember seeing a map of anything, picking specific locations or any of that. It was more like, here's the thing, and here's how we're going to go do this. Let's practice how we're going to go do this.
Yeah.
And so we spent 8 or 10 days at Fort Bragg practicing, here's how we're going to go do this. We learned a lot of simple things like have a glow-in-the-dark, dry erase type of device, acetated glow-in-the-dark thing with a grease pencil so we could pass around notes in the helo, and I like to remind people of just the difference in capability of back then.
Right.
Because everybody's seen, the dude with the 4 tube nods, and
you didn't have like holograms that you move around with your hands and like turn around.
Yeah. Not even radios.
Yeah.
So just the ability to communicate amongst one another, we didn't even have that. So we learned a lot of those and kind of worked out all the bugs on that type of thing. The actual how we went and did it was just kind of the same. It was repetitive, and it was just in different environments, in different conditions, in different, okay, now this happened. We're going to bump an aircraft. Now you're going from this aircraft to that aircraft. So combining of chalks, and these guys are getting cut, or, whatever, that type of thing. So practicing contingencies and things like that. But yeah,
And
it wasn't,
I'm sorry.
we got basically, because we're Rangers and disciplined, we got to stay in tents out on the other side of like Fort Bragg in the middle of the pine trees.
Right.
Every night, like humid as balls, thunderstorms, like lightning clapping off all around you. And our D-bags and rucksacks had to be stowed underneath our cots, because we didn't want to look fucked up.
Right.
So tent floods out like every night. So you've got your stuff like hanging up like a gypsy camp all over the place during the day while you're training. Come back and have to collect up all your things and make sure everything's dried out. And it was like every day that was happening. So It was a win. But we got to use the PX once,
Ooh.
which was super cool.
I mean,
You guys are spoiled, man.
Isn't it wild how they make the suck part of the experience, right?
Like we're going to stand out in the rain for like an hour, and then you can put your wet weather gear on.
Yeah,
afterwards.
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What now? You know, what was the mission for the Rangers, the best light infantry in the world at the time? You know, as I think they like to be known at the time. What was the mission in a UN environment like, you know, Somalia and Mogadishu?
So I don't know. I'm not well read on the entirety of the operation.
Okay.
I don't mean Black Hawk Down but just Unisom 2 was a separate portion of whatever the name was for the UN mission or the US's involvement in the UN mission. So I don't remember what that was. Unisom 2, you know, was a separate thing. And, you know, our job there was just to provide security for the assault force. And, you know, that's what we did.
Right.
Whether it was vehicular kind of further out or closer to the target building or whatever. But that was our job there.
Right. Okay.
And then we did a lot of, you know, it never gets talked about, but the number of missions that we actually did there.
That's what I
there
was just about to ask
7
you.
or 8.
Yeah.
Not to mention, hey, we need to bring this guy to the UN compound so that he can have a high-level meeting with so-and-so, and we've got to provide security for that. It was like daily stuff, you know, things were going on. So, you know, we were doing a lot of driving through the city and a lot of cruising around and signature flights every night and things like that. So, you know, I think people think of that whole experience. We were there more than 60 days, I think about 65 days. And we did a ton of stuff. You know?
What was that like in that era's Ranger Battalion? Like a combat mission is a big deal in 1993.
Yeah. So, you know, trying to explain those days
It's
to,
difficult.
you know, a generation of people that spent 22
Yeah.
years fighting in the
yeah.
GWAT, you know, it's kind of hard to convey that. You know, most of the people that served in the 80s and 90s didn't see combat.
Right.
Like, probably the large majority didn't see anything. And, you know, if your company wasn't picked or your group wasn't picked or whatever it might be, you're not going to see any of that.
Yeah, maybe you got in on Panama. Maybe you got to do a training pump down to, you know, Honduras or something like that.
Yeah. So we, you know, were fortunate enough to get that. And I remember we got, may have been our very first mission. We got in a pretty good gunfight. And we were in a blocking position, kind of facing outwards, and it's kind of on a main drag. And there was a stadium behind us, which wasn't the stadium that we ended up
The
in.
notorious soccer stadium. Yeah.
Yeah, it was where Aidid gave all of his speeches and things like that. And there were 12 guys that had come up behind us, and there were these cinder block walls. And I'm like, this is something I'll never forget. The cinder block was like that decorative cinder block that it had like gaps. And these knuckleheads stuck their guns through there and some RPGs, but they couldn't really traverse the weapons. So there was a hell of a lot of gunfire coming from there. But anyway, we got in that. And afterwards, I remember having the conversation about, do you think we'll get CIBs for that? You know, if this is the best that happened, if this is the biggest gunfight we got in, are we going to get CIBs for that? Or is this just a combat scroll? Are we even going to get a combat scroll? Are the guys that were flying around in helicopters, are they going to get it? You know, nobody really knew. And what I was told at some point later, and I can't remember by who, but somebody who must have had some information, the plan for us was it would have been combat scroll only up until October 3rd. So, you know, multiple gunfights and things like that, mortared, you know.
Interesting.
And up until that point, it would have been combat scroll only.
And I think that people, like, listening to this, people might not appreciate that in a peacetime military, having the combat scroll, having the CIB, like, they're really big deals. Like when you'd see like Grenada Rangers walking around,
Yeah.
or the guys from Panama with their scrolls, it's a big deal. So of course that's going to be the conversation that you guys have after a massive firefight.
Yeah, it's so funny. I mean, like you said, man, it's so difficult to like explain what that culture must have been like prior to 9/11, right? And maybe we're somewhat going back to that now. I mean, I imagine there's a lot of guys out there who don't have CIDs and in special ops units.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. But I remember, one of the other things that's like a standout just of that event and kind of bigger picture, but getting back and the aftermath of everything, and it kind of being like, hey, we're all NCOs now, like we know what we need to do to train our guys properly.
Mm-hmm.
And we know what's important now because we've seen it firsthand. Mm-hmm. And the mentality was, all right, good job. Glad you guys are back. Now you can get back to real Rangering.
Right, exactly.
Make sure your boots are shined and all that stuff. And you think about like the professional jealousy, so you're talking about one company. And when they talk about, there was a platoon from another company that came over, but it was like key people. It was like a platoon of medics, FOs, maybe a handful of squad leaders, people like that. It wasn't an entire platoon. There were some guys there that got chalked away to do extra bodies on the CSAR bird and things like that. But if you think about out of the entire Ranger Regiment and however many people that was at the time, there's 120 guys maybe that experienced this thing, and it was kind of like, we don't really want to we don't want to talk about that, let's get back to the real stuff,
the patrolling.
You guys need a road march,
and
stand to, and all those kinds of things that we all laughed at from that point.
Yeah,
let's talk a little bit about more on the aftermath, because I think, unless there's something that specifically you'd like to get into about the battle itself, I'd like to ask you sort of about the cultural impact that had on the military and on the guys who were there, and sort of how that changed. But like you talked about a little bit, some of it getting swept under the rug too.
Yeah, I think that our company did a really good job of kind of getting rid of a lot of the dumb stuff. And I'll give you an example. And this isn't necessarily like a tangible thing that had to do with our preparedness for war, but in a way it does. Our first sergeant, if you were married, had your family support group meeting and all that stuff. And I remember my buddy who I went to pre-ranger with, that I still communicate with and still hang out with down at Benning and stuff like that. At the very end of the meeting, the first sergeant's kind of wrapping things up, and she's like, I have a question. Yes. First sergeant, what exactly is the word, and why is my husband waiting on it at 6:30 at night? True story. And he goes, you know what? It's a damn good question, and I'm going to do my best that if we got nothing going on, we're going to get people out of here and done for the day. And he held true to his word, and that was kind of the start of the culture being, you know what, there's no point in sitting here in the barracks waiting for the platoon sergeant meeting to be completed when they're down there drinking beers and whatever, and we're just, the privates are up here getting smoked, and there's nothing of value happening at that point, and that started it. And then the leadership, some of like the platoon leader that came in to replace my platoon leader at the time, imagine what he's walking into. There's a platoon of dudes that just did this thing, and he was very respectful of the whole thing. Like, you tell me what you guys think you need to do, and I'll support it. And I'm like, wow, this is kind of like a change.
Yeah.
So I was in an interesting spot. I had told my chain of command prior to going to the JRX in Texas that, hey, I'm out of here. I want to go to the Recon Detachment. And the selection for that was actually in October of '93. So like, cool. After the JRX, when you get back, you can start your train up for that selection, or whatever that entailed. It may have been like a week off or something. Don't remember. But anyway, was supposed to do that in October of '93, and I don't think that they ran a selection course that fall. But anyway, it was just something I remember.
So for people who might not know, I mean, let's talk about the word for a second. What was the word, and why were you waiting around for it?
I think the word is closely attached to the poop. Also.
Yeah, it's also the poop.
Yeah.
The poop, the word. So the word was basically, the first sergeant is meeting with the platoon sergeants, and they're talking about training events. They're talking about, probably big level stuff. And what that would translate to is squad leaders, team leaders, privates sitting around in the barracks waiting for the word to be returned, which was, hey, 06 first call, 6:30 PT.
Right.
So we would sit around for hours waiting for them to come and release us.
Yeah.
And that's what it was, So
almost as much fun as training to time and not standard, right? Yeah. So because we didn't really talk about the battle much, but for people who, probably everybody's seen Black Hawk Down and whatnot. Can you tell from your experience if it got things really right, if it got things really wrong?
So I can't say that I've read the book.
Okay.
And I don't think that there's any intent to that other than I know what I did, and talking with my buddies in different platoons and in different groups, it took us the better part of, 18 months after the event to really be able to kind of piece together exactly what happened. There was no big hot wash, hey, what happened? Nobody was a part of anything like that. I'm sure at other levels there were. Talking joint assault force, security force, air assets. And I'm sure that there was some sort of hot wash at that level. But we really never had anything.
I'm not sure that there was.
And there may not have been, yeah. I know that there were, from the air side, that there were some things that happened that they wanted to bring out, and it wasn't allowed to be brought out. Not my story to tell, but it was just kind of. So when I saw the movie, I recognized, even before seeing it, I got invited to a private screening, and Ridley Scott was there, Jerry Bruckheimer, Will Fichtner, one of the actors, and Mark Bowden. And so to back that up further, I had gone to selection for the Special Mission Unit in North Carolina, and I had been selected right about the time that the whole Philadelphia Online Inquirer article started being written. And I was waiting. My wife at the time was due with our first child, and so they had told me, don't come up for the operator training course. Wait until your son's born, daughter, whatever, and come up to the next one. So I'm in a 4-month hold, more or less. And so the articles start dropping, and people are all over this thing, and it's the talk of the town because, online stuff is new, and definitely people are weighing in that shouldn't be weighing in, and there were some unit people that were weighing in, and that was an issue, and everything else. I got a call from Mark Bowden at my house, who had gotten my number from someone else that he had talked to. Hey, I need to talk to you about a couple of critical moments that you're involved with. And I said, I would love to talk to you, but here's my situation, and I don't want to do something and talk to someone that I'm not supposed to talk to and screw up this opportunity that I've got to go to where I want to go. Let me ask and find out if it's okay, and then I'll get back with you. So I talked with the USASOC public affairs people, and they said, absolutely do not talk with him. We're going to try and squash this whole thing. Don't talk with him. Absolutely not. So I call him back. He calls me. I can't remember which. And I say, hey, man, I would love to talk to you, but I got told no. So I'm sure that, okay, so peel back that onion a little further. Like, if that story, if that book, if that movie was in the court of law, it would never uphold because it's largely hearsay. Mm-hmm. I heard this guy did that. Mm-hmm. I heard from so-and-so that he was here and did these things. I think the timeline is very accurate. Mm-hmm. And I think that there are things that are kind of set in stone that there probably isn't a whole lot of debate. I recognize going to see the screening and, you know, before even thinking about going to see the screening and knowing that a movie was coming out, you can't make 120 people and have 120 characters in the movie. They're going to distill this down to the bare essentials.
And smash them together a little bit.
So this guy does 50 things when really that's an example of 50 different events that happened to 50 different people and we're combining it. Like, I get all that. I also get that it's an 18-hour battle. We're compressing that into a 90-minute format. You know, I'm happy the story was told. Mm-hmm. I think that that's been an incredible thing. And just so that people know, and the number of people that touched, that Jason Everman, our third party friend, he joined because of that. Right. You know, because of that event. That was the impetus for him joining. Right. And how many other people, thousands and thousands of people that joined the military because of that. So I'm glad it was told. Accurate in terms of events and how it happened and how it played out and things like that. I think it's pretty accurate. Yeah. I don't think that it did justice to how barbaric it was and how up close and personal things were. That's, the first thing that kind of stood out was, all right, getting a little anxiety watching this and they're getting ready to roll in and you kind of know what's happening. I don't think that it accurately conveyed the absolute chaos that happened. And when I look back, 2023 me can see the failures at just so many levels. 1993 me, hey man, we made it happen and it was great and we got through it and, we kicked their ass and there are X amount of thousands of them dead and we only lost 18 and blah, blah, blah and all of that. But when I see, 2023 me looks back and says, we had no contingency for what happens if the volume of gunfire is such that we can't communicate. Like, how do I tell my guys what we're doing when there's that much shit flying through the air and it's that loud? How do I convey that? Do we get inside a building and talk somewhere safe so that people know what's going on? And that's not what happened. It was just everything running amok, having no idea. So as an example, first time I got out of the vehicle and I started engaging people, I think I'm at the target building. Now, we're not even close to the target building. Like, we fought our way to the target building. And then we got to the target building, my vehicle left and drove down the road, and I ended up having to singleton down to link up with the vehicle. I had no idea what was going on. It's not like, hey, here's what's going on, we're going to go do this. When we went to go pick up Blackburn, and Casey Joyce was killed right there when that happened. Helicopter. Yeah, it's a Blackburn. It's a kid that fell out of the Halo. We went to go pick him up. I had no idea. I thought we were exfilling. Like, mission over, we're headed back. Right. So just to kind of convey the chaos and not having a radio, not having any situational awareness to what was going on, what you're doing, nobody had a chance. It's not like we could even talk. You'd see people's lips moving and screaming and people yelling and stuff, but that was about it. So I don't know if the movie necessarily,
captured that.
Yeah, the gravity of the situation.
Right.
I've been in a lot of gunfights since. And I never felt like I felt there.
Right.
Just not even in the same. I mean, shit could be going sideways. A helo crash, a helo shot down, QRF is being called, all this stuff might be happening. And I'm like, yeah, we got this, totally different situation. This was completely different and unlike anything that I ever, saw after that.
Out there flapping.
Yeah.
Do you think, this might be asking you to sort of guess and you might not want to guess. So, but why do you think that USASOC was trying to squash it? Was it a military thing that they didn't want people to know the details? Do you think they were getting pressure politically because
I don't think if I'll defend them in this and say it was kind of unprecedented, right? So Panama happened. It's not like we had all this footage and there's CNN right there and seeing people dragged through the streets and all of that. I don't think we had the same kind of connectivity, and the internet developing years later and becoming a thing allowed him to kind of piece together a lot of the book and a lot of the story in a different way. I don't think that USASOC, if that's the approving authority of something, I don't think that they had any idea how to deal with something because there's no class in that,
I think much of that applies to this day. That they still have difficulties dealing with the media and don't understand and think like this will all just go away. This will all just float away. Yeah.
And if we apply enough pressure on someone, maybe we have attorneys and maybe try and, cease and desist or whatever, I don't even know. I'm
right.
Speculating there, but
yeah.
I've talked with Mark Bowden since then, and I was trying to put together for the 30th anniversary, which just happened. I was trying to put together. I didn't want it to be a podcast, but I was trying to put together a mechanism for how to tell some of these like really incredible stories of not war stories, but kind of other stuff that happened that people aren't familiar with or know about. And again, some of them aren't really my story to tell, but the only way that I felt like I could tell all these stories was through like a podcast, because you could have different people on. You can kind of let the conversation evolve. Not like a book where it's like, here I'm writing about what this guy experienced or something like that. And anyway, kind of got everything lined up for that. I talked to Mark Bowden. Would he be interested in participating? He was absolutely yes. And really one of the things that I wanted to talk to him about was the Hollywoodization of real people. So, Matt Eversman being the main Ranger character.
Josh Hartnett's character.
Josh Hartnett, who did a really good job of portraying the guy, really did a great job of portraying him and kind of his mannerisms and everything else. Went out on the initial assault and never went back out after the initial assault. And so imagine being Matt and being asked by everyone that knows that you were there, hey, when this happened, well, I wasn't really there.
Right.
Well, no, that really didn't. No, that was somebody else.
Right.
No, that was,
Did they have to pay him life rights to use his name like that in the movie?
No, I don't think so.
Really?
I mean, my name got used in the movie, and I didn't participate in any way, shape, or form.
As Brad Thomas?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, the other thing though is that if people in the community, people who were there or whatever,
they're like, hey, you weren't there, motherfucker.
But if they're like, hey, like, what did you tell Bowden that like you were there the whole time? He's like, I told him exactly what I did.
Yeah.
Well, Bowden didn't make the movie. Ridley Scott did.
Yeah. But it's adapted from the book and all of that. But it just, from my perspective, how did he gather information?
Right.
How many people did he talk to?
Right.
And I was really curious as to what was his process? And
right.
When did he find out? When did he know who he was going to use and, who he wasn't going to use or any of that?
Yeah.
But I thought that would have been an interesting perspective to been able to tell that story.
Yeah, for sure.
And then another part of it was going to be like kind of before, what was life in the Ranger Regiment like
Yeah.
prior to 1993?
Yeah.
And you kind of can't really tell the story without going back in time a little bit and talking about, the differences of how dumb we were and how nothing really made any sense, and our PT program was horrible. And, we talk about that now with some of the young kids that are in.
They're like,
and
what?
And I'm like, yeah, so check it out. If you fell out of the run, you did remedial PT in the afternoon after lunch. So imagine being in the state of breakdown.
Right.
And then, hey, you couldn't run a 6-minute mile, so we're going to do another run this afternoon.
Right. Yeah.
And then tomorrow morning, we're going to get up and run again.
Yeah.
Just every day,
So did this this series ever come about?
No, it didn't. And there were a lot of really good stories. And there were a couple reasons it didn't. One, like reliving that stuff. It's not
It's
like
tough for some guys.
it puts me personally in a headspace it's not like I'm walking around suicidal or anything like that. It's just, man, it's not a fun subject.
Do you want to
Yeah.
relive it every day?
Right, and then have to talk about, and then we discovered this thing, and now we need to try and get this
I
guy
get it.
on and everything
Right.
else. Last summer, so this all kind of conceptualized last summer, ended up spending almost all of July and August in the studio recording an album. And when that got settled, people don't understand the amount of work that goes into recording is one part of actually, releasing an album. You've got artwork, you've got all the mixing, all the mastering, all of the, hey, we need a stripped vocal version for this thing, have all the social media stuff. Like it is a monster. And I was so happy and like proud of the album and everything that we were doing and going through. And it's like, I'm in this zone, like in this vibe. And the last thing I felt like doing was just like,
Going back.
Mogadishu.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, man, if we can put this off to summer 2023, and if we can release the first episode by like October, that'll be a win. And then it just turned into scheduling stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going all the time, doing whatever. And,
Yeah.
just couldn't get it done. But really, it was almost by choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there were some really powerful stories. I'm not going to name names. Here's a full circle moment. There was a Ranger squad leader who, during the battle, directed his squad to fire at what he thought were bad guys on the rooftop of a building, which weren't bad guys on the rooftop of a building. They were assaulters. And that guy almost immediately got sent home, fired, sent down the road. So imagine being that guy and living through the trauma of that battle and the magnitude of that and being completely ostracized. He was an import, which didn't help him.
Right.
And I can't say whether he was a super likable guy, didn't work with him, didn't know him personally. But imagine being that guy and overcoming all of the things that we all overcame as a tribe. And I thought his story would just be incredible to tell because he's got shame, embarrassment, guilt, all of these things that are really the stuff. Like that's the stuff that fucks guys up. It's not, I did a horrific thing or I saw something bad, or it's all those other things that are kind of rolled into it. So I'm telling this story to one of the other people that was going to be involved. And one of the other people that was involved was like, man, I would love to talk to that guy because we had a fratricide incident on the very first operation. And the guy that was so vocal about what he did was the one that was cranking rounds off at friendlies on our assault.
No
and I was like,
shit.
Big
so maybe
smoke
it's
screen.
Yeah. So you start
A little bit of
that's what I'm
projection
saying.
going
It's
on
like
there.
it's not. The intent wasn't for it to be, here relive your war story and tell your war story. It was really to be telling these stories. I know personally another thing that kind of came up from the 30th happened a year prior. there was an awards upgrade that happened. And I don't know if you guys heard about that. Okay. So somebody decided, and I've heard through the grapevine, I don't know this to be true, that it had something to do with the awards that are given during a specific battle. If it hits a certain mark, then like anybody from the task force could be buried in Arlington or something. That could be totally wrong. So if you know the real story, hit me up on social media and let me know what the real story is. I'm trying to find it out. Anyway, we're going to upgrade all these people. And first of all, I know military awards are about as jacked up as they could, ever
What?
be. Right?
What?
But as an example, like if you're at this level, this is the award that you got. If you're at this level, this is the award that you got. I know a dude that got an ARCOM with a V device. True story. There's like, that's kind of like the private that was running around doing stuff in the street, dealing it. Okay.
Dealing death. Yeah.
And okay, so imagine this.
So ridiculous.
And this is kind of a sensitive subject, I think, to some degree, but if you're a casualty, doesn't mean that you automatically, like, a valorous award isn't what you're awarded for being killed in battle. You're given a Purple Heart, you're posthumously maybe promoted or things like that, but someone gets killed and they get a Bronze Star with V, and here's private guy running around for 18 hours laying it down, and he gets an ARCOM with V device. So anyway, the awards upgrade happens. And imagine being, I'm a semi-public person. Imagine people asking you, hey, did you get upgraded? Did you get upgraded? No, man. No, I'm a shitbag. I didn't get upgraded. Like, I don't know how they picked who got upgraded, but 29 years after the battle, which was probably 28 years after the award ceremony, I'm still like feeling shame or embarrassment by the award that I was given and that I wasn't upgraded, but these other people were.
Right.
And I don't think that anybody looked at it that way. I think it was just like, hey, we're trying to right a wrong. We're trying to get people silver stars that got only bronze stars. We're trying to whatever. I don't know the impetus or the intent, but I felt like at the time, and I didn't even know if I was getting upgraded or not, having conversations with some of my peers and was like, man, this is a bad thing. It's going to make and ruffle a lot of feathers for people that are getting things, other people aren't getting things. Right. And it's more about the people that aren't getting things than it is the people that are getting things. So anyway, that's just...
Do you feel like that whole battle was somewhat like the I don't know, like the zeitgeist around it was accentuated because of the intense, I don't want to say media scrutiny, but the intense amount of attention that particular battle got, that it's something that became like Army legend, not just Ranger legend, but Army.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I think it was an important, moment in our military history. Our first engagement with Al Qaeda, we didn't know that at the time, but that was really our first kind of engagement with that. I think it was the first real example of the media being there and having stuff. So, as an example, we ended up, at about 10 o'clock the next day, we end up in a stadium. We're kind of reconsolidating, reorganizing, and dead and wounded or being moved out and transported and things like that. We still have to drive back through the city to get back to the hangar. And I don't think we got back to the hangar until about 1 o'clock. So we get back to the hangar. Everybody's taking their gear off. We're kind of doing a reunited thing with other guys that we haven't seen yet. And all of a sudden, in the back corner of the hangar, they had a TV. And, we'd watch movies back there. And you got like 400 people task force trying to watch Naked Gun or something like that back there. So anyway, all of a sudden everybody starts running back to the corner. And so we make our way over there, and the first thing we see is like dudes getting drug around through the streets. So nobody knew, like nobody had we didn't have accountability for people. So we didn't even know that there were people that weren't accounted for. In my mind, it's like, hey, we're back home. We got everybody. You guys got everybody. We're all back, and things are cool. We didn't know until I think it was 3 or 4 days later that Durant pops up on CNN, and I don't think that they knew whether he was alive or dead.
Yeah.
So just that in itself, I guess kind of speaks to the chaos and
Yeah.
or how the media was involved with something where
You have to watch
it hadn't-
CNN to find out what you've been through.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
One
yeah.
of the things that I remember about that time is, like, I would say that a lot of the military has, like a lot of it or used to at least generally lean somewhat conservative. So there would be this, Republican Democrat thing, but there was a real split at that point in time because people felt like, where the government would not give them ACs, because they didn't, because they didn't want to appear to be too like harsh. They didn't want the imagery of American, forces over there. So we don't have necessarily, the soldiers didn't necessarily have the things that they really needed, relying on Pakistani armor and, and things like that.
Sure.
Because the Americans didn't have what they needed.
Sure. I've had a few conversations about just like the political aspect of the whole operation. And there are people that are very heated about that, to this day.
Yeah.
We'd had these things, no doubt. An AC-130
Would've changed
flying
things.
around, immediate game changer. I totally get it. We were there very covertly,
Yeah.
to the point that people got haircuts to look like we were all just some Rangers coming over here to do, it was a very kind of under the radar,
Right.
not intending to be. So how can you go do that and then have all this shit flying around overhead,
Right.
fast movers, naval gunfire, whatever you want to have. And so I look at it like we could have either gone and done it, or the military could have said, here's our bottom line, and if we don't get this, we're not doing it.
Right.
And maybe it would have never happened.
Right.
I think it was an important mission. I think what we were there to do was an important mission as much as any GWAT mission could be.
Yeah.
And all of the things that we ended up doing there. But I don't think politically, America was in a place, or
Yeah.
the landscape was in a place where like, hey, we're gonna send over this thing and it's gonna be this big
We're
offensive.
gonna do
like,
a war.
We're invading.
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know? And,
Right.
And it was really under the radar. So I'm not, and I'm a very apolitical person. And
Yeah.
I try not to do anything political
Yeah.
on social media. I don't want to divide people, but I can understand why we didn't have some of the things that maybe we would have normally,
Yeah.
and why that would be, a risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also I don't want to speak out of turn, but there may have been some like legal prohibitions about having aircraft with strafing capabilities. But we had AC-130 historian on the show that would be a better person to talk to
Yeah,
about
for
that
sure.
than anything I know about.
Yeah, I mean, we're there, we're in this country to hand out aid.
Right.
Bags of
That's
rice.
why we're there.
Right.
The aid starts getting stolen and they're killing people to get the aid, and then they're black marketing it, or they're doing whatever, handing it out to only their tribe, or
Right.
whatever it is. And so coming in with this big, here we are,
Right. Right.
like I get it. There are plenty of other things that we've done elsewhere that isn't this big march into the city.
Right.
And,
Yeah, and after something goes really, really wrong, of
Yeah.
course we look like assholes
Yeah.
in the aftermath.
Why are we even
like,
here?
Like Benghazi.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You know.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about Ranger Recon.
okay.
After that whole event, you came back. You had already kind of like committed yourself or voiced
Yeah,
to
so I-
your leadership that you were interested in going to selection for this.
Yeah, let me answer that, and then I'll let
Yeah.
you finish. So I had told them, hey, I want to go to this. Selection was supposed to be October of '93. That didn't happen, and obviously, when we got back, my platoon definitely took the brunt of everything, and we're pretty much wiped out. Like all the NCOs, I was soon to be. I would have promoted to E5 had I not said I want to go to selection for this thing. So I would have promoted that summer, June or July or whatever. They actually did a promotion board over there, and I would have gone to that and gotten promoted. So anyway, hey, I'm pulling myself out. I'm going to go do this thing. When that happened and we got back, I was like, I would feel like an asshole if I said, hey, I'm leaving. I feel like I've got to help rebuild the platoon. I know what we need to do to be successful. I want to make sure that we get back up, plussed up as much as we can before I go and leave and do something else. So you've got me for like another 18 months, something like that. And ended up spring of 95 is when I went to selection. But then I'll let you finish your question.
You're
probably like, what was my question again?
No, you're on the right track. So you want to stay around and make sure the platoon got back up on its feet before taking off. I don't know if you know the exact numbers, but like as far as casualties in your platoon.
Yeah, pretty much every NCO, and then my last peer, with the exception of one guy, got hit by the mortar round that hit on the 6th of October. That killed a unit guy and wounded a bunch of folks. But we were standing out in front of the hangar and we were smoking cigarettes. And it's funny because I had met Wayne Downing there on the 6th. And Wayne told me to, so General Downing, Ranger legend, 4-star general, I think he was the SOCOM general at the time. I had met him that afternoon and he was like, Ranger Thomas, you need to quit smoking. And I was like, whatever. When they stopped.
This wasn't Jerry Boykin that told you to stop smoking?
No.
Sure?
No. So General Downing tells me I need to stop smoking. And anyway, I'm out front and it's, evening or whatever. And me and a couple of dudes are standing out there having cigarettes and a couple dudes smoking cigars and stuff like that. And I take like 2 steps. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to go back inside and do whatever. I take like 2 steps. And like, this thing hits. And the lights go out. And then you hear people screaming. It was just like total chaos. And I think we thought like, okay, we're going to go back out into the city. I don't think we even knew what we were going to do or not do. But anyway, so my last kind of peer got hit in the neck, nicked his jugular. But he came walking in and me and a buddy that came to my platoon, it's like a reinforcement that came over that day. He and I had been roommates like when I first got there and stuff like that. He got a DUI and had been sent down the road. He had just come back and he was like, I'm supposed to be in B company. Totally lied. Got on the plane saying that, somebody had told him he was supposed to go back to B company. And he shows up there and was like, what's up? But anyway, friend comes staggering in and he goes, I'm going to pass out. And we're like, no, man, you're good. And so break out the flashlight and kind of start working on him. And he goes unconscious. And it was kind of like, well, he's dead. I'm going to start. And the brain kind of immediately started to move on. And anyway, that was a long drawn out way to answer the question. But that was kind of like my last peer. And, really after that, it was just slim pickings. There were dudes that were getting medically, discharged. There were people that would never fully recover, still in the process at some degree. Maybe my ankle's going to be good. Maybe my foot's going to be whatever. I don't know percentage. It seemed like all the privates were good to go. But gunners, everybody, I think there were, 120 people on the ground that day. I think it was something about that. And 77 Purple Hearts. So
okay, so that's a good number.
Yeah, it was pretty significant. And then another however many it came on the 6th when more people got hit with the mortar.
So you stuck around for another year and a half or so and then went off to selection. Tell us about RRD selection at that time, 1995?
Yeah, 95. So it was extremely basic, and I think they had been through different iterations, and I can't remember. I used to probably know like more of what it was. They used to go do this, and I don't remember now. But I know that I went through a very basic kind of selection for it. It was a PT test, a road march. There may have been, one other physical type event. And then it was kind of like a board, commander's board. And me and another buddy from my platoon both made it and got selected. So it was pretty basic. I don't think there were a lot of people trying out though.
Do they still put you up in the mountains in Dahlonega at that time? And
so that was something that once I got there, and this was kind of what the article was about. So at some point in 96, Colonel Lazinski, the 6th Colonel of the Ranger Regiment, decided that there were some other people that were doing missions for the Rangers, and he didn't want that to happen. And he wanted Rangers to do Ranger stuff, and probably being a little, cryptic here, but anyway, he basically said, I want the Recon detachment to be on par with other organizations, and whatever it takes to get there, I want some smart guys to help figure out what needs to be done to get this group to the 20th century. And we had things like Bosnia was happening, and so semi-permissive environment, not combat operations per se. So he came down and talked to the regimental S2, and the regimental S2 came and talked to the detachment. And he said, I'm looking for a couple of smart guys that are senior that can figure out how to put together a training course, a selection process, and what it takes, what we're looking for, trying to figure out what we're looking for. So I raised my hand. I had been there for maybe a year, and that was 97. So I had been there for about 2 years and was like an assistant team leader, and said, I want to be a part of that. I want to figure out what it takes to get us, into the next generation. So I put together the selection process, and my buddy Scott Sterling, who died a few years ago of cancer, he and another guy took on what has become the reconnaissance training course. So they put that together, and I put selection together, and that's kind of how I came to be.
for the square community out there, tell people what RRD is. What did you guys do? What was the purpose of this unit?
So I don't know. I mean, from the stuff that I did there, nothing of it is, super OPSEC and, secretive or anything else. But they're basically, coming in and looking at things and figuring out atmospherics and doing all that kind of stuff so that the group that's coming in to do whatever is, got a little bit of situational awareness about what they're getting into.
That was a total bullshit answer, but thank you, Brad.
Yeah.
So let's talk a moment then. There's also there was at the time a bit of a stigma around RRD that I'd like to talk about, because I think it was still lingering a bit even when I got to Ranger Regiment, that you and I had talked about, that there is this idea that, RRD got compromised on every training operation. And I think that kind of stuck with them for a little bit. It was kind of unfortunate, but could you talk a little bit about why that came about?
So when I got there, as an example, the team would get utilized, my team supported 3rd Ranger Battalion. So if there was a company that was doing a live fire operation out on Kilo 22 at Fort Benning, they would have my team go in and hey, you go figure out where our support by fire position would be. You go figure out where, report in weather, report in whatever, all that kind of jazz. So we were really kind of being underutilized. Mm-hmm. And I lost track of where I was going with that.
Where that the battalion and a lot of the Joes, the guys
okay,
felt
so-
that RRD was just always
Yeah.
fucked up and always compromised.
So the point would be, like, you're sneaking around out there and you're trying not to get caught by either a fake enemy or a bunch of privates that have been assigned with being Op 4 for a a target. And they're being maybe a little overly aggressive because they want to try and bust.
Find you.
They want to try and bust someone. So anyway, what we were told there was, here's where you want to push the envelope. Like, you want to try and see what you can get away with and what you can't get away with, because it's training and it doesn't really count.
See what's possible.
So, you'd have an enemy situation, as an example. The enemy has roving patrols out to 700 meters out from the target area. But really, these privates were going out like, 2 kilometers,
Right.
And they're beating the brush looking for you.
Yeah.
And, so here you are pushing the envelope, and now you're getting rolled up by, a couple of jackasses that are doing something that they weren't supposed to do. Anyway, it doesn't fit with the enemy situation
Right.
and scenario and all of that stuff. So to your point, yeah, that was kind of like the bad blood. It was those guys are always getting compromised. Those guys are always getting rolled up on target. Those guys are always this. They're a bunch of cowboys. They're, oh, look, now they've got long hair.
Right.
And
Which was the real issue.
All they do is jump.
Yeah. Right.
And that's another misnomer. It's like, strap a bunch of shit onto yourself and jump out of a plane at night into a tiny little Fort Benning drop zone from 24,000 feet.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about a gut check,
Yeah.
stepping off that ramp.
That's
something.
The story. The story I'll tell. That when I was a tab spec 4 in Ranger Battalion, and RRD came and gave us like the absolute worst recruitment brief I had ever seen in my life. They're like, yeah, hey guys, you come to RRD and you can jump out of airplanes with an extra 800 pounds of gear in this bundle. And yeah, we jump with an extra 800 pounds. You can free fall and do, and like, we're all looking at this like, no, absolutely not. No one was even remotely interested in this job, which is, again, it's unfortunate because there's a lot of stuff that element does that's really interesting and good. And
especially now, like but also
this was 2004 or 5.
Okay.
I mean, this was
Also,
they were doing some interesting stuff.
Also at the time, like, I don't know how it is now, but at the time, you probably had just internal sabotage too, not internal to RRD, but the idea in a regiment is you either grow up and die in regiment, you go to Delta, or you're a shitbag. If you go to RD, you're a shitbag. If you go to SF, you're a shitbag. Actually, if you're on the line and you go to the sniper section, you're a shitbag. Like, if you're anything but an assaulter, you're a shitbag, you know? And the only acceptable place to go from Ranger Battalion is either, Fort Living Room or Delta, where you're an assaulter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much a cultural, a cultural thing. I was kind of expecting that to some degree when I left. And I think, like, I remember they gave me my going away plaque maybe a month early. And it was because it coincided with, like, the Ranger Ball. And they're like, hey, man, we're going to give this thing to you here, so you got to be there, blah, 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 blah. And I remember thinking that, and, like, how am I being perceived? Is it I'm quitting and leaving?
You're a quitter, yeah.
And I think the camaraderie from having all been together in Mogadishu, it definitely wasn't viewed that way.
That's great. Yeah.
I didn't feel that way. They didn't make me feel that way. They gave me this huge Somalia-shaped plaque that has all kinds of, like, cool pictures on it and, artifacts and stuff like that. So I didn't feel that way, but I know what you say is true.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great.
Any other final thoughts about RRD before we move on?
Like I said, in my mind, looking back at, the scope of the whole career, it was definitely one of the best kept secrets in terms of the amount of satisfaction I got, job satisfaction. I know that they're way more versed in way more things now and probably way better trained and everything else. But at that time, it was the only real place that you could be where it wasn't, I'm a sergeant, you're a private, I'm going to yell at you until I get you to do what you should be doing and things like that. And that just never really fit me.
Yeah.
I did it. I was a hellion for, probably 2 years. Or probably, sorry. Sorry to people that maybe I crossed at some point. But, I won't mention his name, but I had this very humbling moment happen. And it was kind of like the shift from when I went from hellion to being like maybe an actual leader. And I had this kid who, the deal, man. When you see kids, you can kind of tell, like, not gonna fit, needs some work, needs whatever. And I had this kid, and I was ruthless with him for about a week. And he was hanging in there, and I was like, I'm gonna change my tactic. And so I called him into my room, and I'm like, all right, man, here's the deal. We can keep playing this game, and I keep smoking you and all of that, or, you can just quit. And, there's no shame in that, whatever. And he goes, okay, Sergeant, I quit. And I'm like, what? Like, that's all it took? Being nice to you, and you're going to quit? And I said, why did you want to be here anyway? And he goes, well, my dad was a Ranger in Vietnam.
Yeah,
and I was like, fuck, man. Like, that was a deep moment for me.
Yeah.
In realizing that, like, I'm torturing this kid because I can. He probably needs it to some level.
Yeah.
And get pushed a little bit to see whether he's going to hang in there. But that was a moment where things kind of changed for me. It was like, all right, I need to get these kids squared away. It's not my job to be a dick. They've already had that. I'm gonna lead them, and I'm gonna be different.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a start point for that, for me.
Yeah.
And how did it go from making that jump from RRD to JSOC?
So I joined the Army with the intent of, hey, I always want to end
From
up
telling your recruiter day one.
Hey man, get me there. they need me.
Yeah. Right. Right.
They don't know they need me yet,
Right.
but they need me. That was the intent. I think if there was anything, and a recruiter's job isn't to like lay out your career progression and everything else, but I didn't understand. Like, my goal very quickly went from, I want to be in this unit that I view as the tip of the spear, and most other people view that way. It went to, I need to survive. I need to survive here. If I can't make it here, I can't make it, And so it became a survival thing. And then it's like, man, I'm actually thriving in this highly aggressive, highly competitive, physically and mentally challenging environment. Like, I'm living, and I'm going out boozing, and
Right.
it's like anybody can do this when you're not hungover. If you can do it when you're hungover, whole different level. But anyway, then it kind of was like, okay, your goal is to get to Ranger School. I make it through that finally. Then, once they realize they got you and you're going to stick around, get to combat, that was a whole separate thing. Then it was, hey, we're sending you to Jump Master. We're sending you to SEER School. We're sending you to get you schooled out, get you promoted, and all of that stuff. So I recognized at that point, like, I need to make a step somewhere, and that was where the Recon Detachment kind of came in. But, I didn't realize it was going to take me 8 years to get to the place that I ultimately wanted to go. Mm-hmm. And so, similarly, kids will hit me up on social media, hey, I want to go here. And it's like, man, just get in, prove yourself. Like, that will come.
Right.
That's years down the road.
Yeah.
Like, years down the road. And I think with probably the social media buzz and people seeing pictures of stuff, it's like they think that they're, going to be there. But ultimately, it takes a lot of sacrifice and a lot of time and I mean, it's your life. And
Yeah.
for 8 years, that was my life, you
Yeah.
know, just to get in the door.
Yeah.
And so to answer your question, I always wanted to end up there. You know, that was kind of my plan. Even the recon thing was more about, and something maybe I learned about myself is I'm not good at just sitting in one thing, you know, like I need to constantly challenge. I like to challenge myself. I think that's when you grow. I think that, you know, that's when you learn the most about yourself. And so just being happy with being in the line company, it just wasn't doing it for me. That's not to say that it's not fine for somebody else,
Right.
just for me. And the same thing happened to me later when I got to the place I wanted to be. It was, okay, I've been here for 5 years. How many more times can I go do this? How many more
Right,
times
right,
can I?
right.
It's a very cyclical lifestyle. And it got very boring and kind of stagnant. And, you know, that became a thing where it's like, okay, well, what do I do now? I've got 14, 15 years in, and it's 5 years to cross the finish line, but this is kind of getting old and
Yeah.
all that stuff.
What
But-
what form did that take for you? Is like, you know, I understand whether it's like seizing airfields or clearing rooms or whatever the mission is. At a certain point, you gain like a certain level of proficiency, and from what you're telling me, it's like, I'm kind of ready to like move on to the next thing.
Yeah. I think once you get to a point where you realize like whatever they throw at me, I can solve the problem, I can handle it, I can physically accomplish it or whatever. I don't know what it is, but I always feel like, you know, it's 4 years, 5 years, and I'm kind of ready for that next challenge.
Right.
That's one of the things that I've been like with music. It's always a challenge. It's coming up with the next thing, the creative process of writing something. Where does that come from? You know, and I put myself in like different mind frames for that versus something else. But yeah, I don't know. That's just me. You know, I'm always looking for something else. When I got to the unit, I remember seeing these guys that were like, he's been here 12 years. You know, he's been here 16 years. And you're like, wow, that's crazy. Like, legend. And, you know, that was right for them.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, not so much.
Yeah.
You know, it was, all right, what's the next step? What's the
Right.
next chapter? What am I going to do? How am I going to continue to challenge myself or find something or learn something new or do something different?
So, did you find something that was fulfilling in those last 5 years for you?
Yeah, I ended up working like maybe the last 4 years, 3.5, 4 years. I ended up working like in the combat development R&D type of thing, which, you know, was a great transition out of the military. But that kind of gave me, I don't know, the ability to learn about how body armor is tested and what a helmet, how it needs to perform to do X, Y, and Z, camouflage, uniforms, apparel, gear, all that kind of stuff. So that was incredibly rewarding, you know, and fulfilling. So I had a ton of fun with that.
Yeah. Did you, did you have an opportunity then? Because here you are on the cutting edge of like R&D, and I imagine it's part of the procurement chain. Did you have an opportunity to see things that were in development or theoretical that may not even be in production yet, but stuff that's like, wow, if this ever like comes online, it's a game changer?
Yeah, and that was kind of like my role, was to be able to see things and figure out how to apply that to something, you know, operational to solve a problem or a deficiency or a shortfall.
Yeah.
You know, so if a military unit says, I lack the ability to be able to do X, the first thing that the military unit looks at is, can that be solved with training? Mm-hmm. If not, you know, is it something that we need an item? If it needs to be an item, we're not defining what the item is and saying, we need the X, Y, and Z brand thing that does, you know, whatever. You're basically saying, we need something that's going to enable us to get from here to here in a safe manner, whatever.
Yeah.
You're kind of writing a requirement for what the thing should be.
Yeah.
And then you're throwing that to industry to see who can fill that void.
Yeah.
That's kind of how that works.
Now, do you still like watch the industry in terms of like what people are creating, what kind of new things are out there?
To some degree, and have developed a bunch of stuff myself.
Yeah.
And with folks, and that's been lucrative and everything else. So, I'm not in it so much as like who's got a new boot. That,
Right. Right.
I don't look down at that level. It's more like looking at capability gaps or missing pieces. That's something that this would help. This is a good idea because these guys are missing this one thing that would make their job easier, better, whatever it might be.
Right. And we've seen technology, especially warfighting technology, like change so rapidly over the last years. What to you, as a futurist, not with, current technology, but as a futurist, what do you think are like some really exciting emerging technologies right now for the warfighter?
There's a lot of stuff that I've seen that I won't talk about. That's probably the most exciting stuff.
Okay.
And not my place to say. I will say that if you go to a show like Soft Week, which used to be SOFIC down in Tampa, and it's kind of like SOCOM's industry day, more or less. If you go to that, it used to be, did you see that new Arc'teryx jacket?
Right.
Did you
right.
see that new,
Right.
Merrill boot, whatever? It used to be all about the gear.
Yeah.
And now it's all tech. Everything is about tech.
Yeah.
I correlate that to the guys and gals being super happy with the stuff that they have.
Uh-huh.
If the thing that's touching you every day sucks, like you want to change it, if the thing that's touching you every day is pretty good, let's worry about other things.
Well, I'm still happy with my Whoopee and my bear suit. Well, with my sleep light.
This year it was like a lot of drones. It was a lot of technology. There's a little bit of like Arctic warfare stuff.
Yeah.
That you definitely wouldn't have seen that stuff 5-10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, the world's a changing and ever evolving place. So, there's all kinds of things. I feel like in the gear apparel world, nothing is really going to significantly change until the battlefield changes.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's about as mature as it can be for the current, landscape. And, they've got everything dialed in,
Yeah.
We've been operating in one basic area
Yeah.
for 22 years, and the stuff that people have is good. The levels of ballistic protection and how tweaked that is, it's about as mature as you can get it. Stuff isn't getting any lighter, really. Maybe a little bit here and there, but there's no real leap in technology because, there really doesn't need to be. It's about as refined as it could be.
Right.
So if you were to say, all right, we're going to now be fighting in the jungles of the Philippines, and we need gear and uniforms and things like that are going to sustain us there, I think, wow, okay, there's a whole lot of opportunity with that. But tech is that's the big thing.
And you heard it here first, guys. Brad Thomas, expert in the field, says we're going to be fighting in the jungles in the Philippines next. Insider knowledge. D, make sure you clip that. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is interesting because even looking at like cold weather gear, right? Like, like the civilian market has always moved so much faster than the military, but the military, and I think that like JSOC, Unison JSOC had led that charge where they were, adapting, like, whether it was it like Rakeley boots or like just they were out there experimenting and had the budget and the procurement process to experiment.
Sure.
Where, I think like during the 90s we were wearing cold weather gear, the same cold weather gear they were wearing in the Korean War.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Or, I get to the Ranger Battalion in 91 and I'm wearing a Vietnam era web gear.
Yeah.
I was a saw gunner in Mogadishu. I had a LBE that had 5.56 mag pouches on it, that because it was the Ranger SOP RSOP, I had to carry 6 magazines in my magazine pouches
For a weapon you didn't have.
for a weapon that I wasn't even carrying. And then I'm slinging around like bandoliers of ammo. There was nothing to carry that stuff then.
Yeah.
Now, if you see what these guys have now and the way they're carrying it and how smart it is, and they're like, well, you know, this could be a lot better. Like, dude,
Yeah.
you have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound like I am, but I
Right.
don't want to be like, "Oh, back in my day,
Right.
we used a compass," and
Right.
and that's what you end up sounding like. But their whole world is like, you know,
Different,
they're trying to improve what they've got and make it better and everything else.
Yeah.
But they've got really good stuff.
Yeah, until
you
we
know?
have like Star Wars blasters that don't require magazines
The
at all.
Infinimag.
Like we've kind of gotten to the point where we've maximized it.
So
Yeah.
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 talk to us about retirement and what you went on to, the transition process, and then we'll talk about the music.
Sure. Music always gets the fucking very end, you know,
Because
which is
it's the
fine.
chrono- it's the
We're following a
chronological-
time.
it's a
We're following a
chronological
timeline.
order.
It's because we don't like those hippie,
This is
hippie
like-
artists. Yeah.
Yeah. This is like
Communists.
everything that I do media wise, it's like always at the very end. It's like, talk about your story.
I don't mean to shortchange it.
No, not at all. It's like that's when people are like, all right, I'm done with this. I was ready to retire, and I feel like for a large portion of people that separated from the military, whether that was retirement or whether that was being medically retired or ETSing after 8 years or whatever it might be, I got to do it on my terms. And there's a huge difference in being able to do something on your terms and when that's taken from you. So I lose the lower half of my leg and I'm out. Man, it's like I'm still trying to do that thing.
Right.
I was ready to retire. It was kind of like, all right, I've had a good run. I did a ton of cool stuff. I work with the best people. A part of everything that you could be a part of and then some. And I'm just ready to move on and do something else.
Plus, you did the thing that you went in to see the Air Force recruiter to do in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I was super satisfied, ready to, move on and find another challenge. I recognized going into that process that I'm going to lose my identity. That thing that I sacrificed 8 years to become this, and then I spent another 12 years doing that. I recognized that's all going away. And so I knew it was coming. And it didn't make it necessarily any easier, but I kind of knew that it was coming. And the one thing I would say, and this is like a double-edged sword, I never fully identified as just being an operator. I play guitar. I'm a dad. I was a husband. I am a brother. I love doing these things. All of those things were as much a part of who I was as being an operator. And when it came time to not being an operator anymore, it was kind of like I can fall on these other things that I have that are interests. It could be hobbies. It could be whatever. I started struggling, not personally, I started struggling with other people coming to me, telling me how they were struggling. And it bothered me to the point that I assembled a small group of former guys like me. It was like, how do we fix this fucking problem? There's people that are, full bird colonels who are telling me that they're ready to not be on the planet anymore because they're struggling with something so badly. And people that I would never have dreamed, confiding in me. And maybe I was a person that was easy to talk to, or whatever. The double-edged sword part of, I'll go backwards a second. The double-edged sword part of like not identifying solely as a commando is that you're not the best commando. And in a school of great white sharks, it doesn't sit well sometimes, So No, I never claimed, nor will I ever claim to have been the world's best commando. I've seen tons of the world's best commandos be horrible fathers, be horrible husbands, be horrible friends, be horrible drinkers, whatever, you name it. So when I talk with young people about what they're getting ready or think that they are getting ready to do, I try and explain that to them, that just being the world's greatest commando, you may be a failure in everything else in your life.
Yeah.
So, that it takes a toll.
Yeah.
Right? So anyway, I got to the point, maybe 2012, 2013, 2 years after retirement, where, all right, people are confiding in me that they're struggling with stuff. There's nothing that exists to help them. I didn't want to start a foundation. I didn't want to be like, my buddy killed himself, so I'm going to do this thing. I didn't want to do that. I don't want to ask people for money. And I would every week kind of question, I'd go out drinking, whatever. What do I need to do? So I assembled this small group of dudes like me that retired from the same place. I'm like, how do we solve this problem? And started going and talking with the unit leadership about, we should be leading the charge on this. It's not your job to transition people out of the military. Your job is to kill and capture high-value targets, to do whatever. That's your role. I get it. But you have a lot of resources, and if there's a way we can go about doing stuff that's going to make people feel better about separating or retiring, we should be able to figure that out. And I kept, talking with them about stuff, and got even more frustrated because it just kind of, that's not their job. And they don't know, I didn't join the Army to be a, squadron commander and then figure out how to transition people out of the military.
It's interesting, the perspective of the person who's in it versus out of it. And you can be the unit sergeant major one day and the next day you're out of it. And hey, no one out on the street gives a shit about who you are or what you did.
Yeah.
Killing people isn't a marketable job still,
right. Yeah.
If you want a contract or you want to do that stuff, have at it. But yeah, that's kind of the thing that I recognized. And the frustrating part was realizing that there is much of a problem, much of a part of the problem as what the guy that's struggling is.
The military leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, their job is to keep their unit operational and running.
Yeah.
So it's easier to ignore guys with noticeable problems because those guys, like you say, can be high performers on the job. Yeah. It's just when you leave them at home for 8 weeks with nothing to do, where they fall apart.
Sure. So I kind of got to a point where maybe by 2014, 2015, it just kind of felt like stuff was falling on deaf ears. A buddy of mine, Tom Spooner, who started Warrior's Heart, and at the time it was kind of a very, there wasn't a lot of social media presence. There wasn't a lot of how do we get people help? How do we help raise funds to get people help? How do we, do that kind of thing? And he and I didn't necessarily have a formal agreement on anything, but it was kind of like, if I can help out in some way and get the word, of the service you're providing with the facility that you've got going, I want to do that for you. So yeah, okay, cool. And anyway, our mutual friend, Jason Everman, this was 2017 now. So I'm still kind of floundering around trying to figure out exactly what I want to do. 2017, Jason and he came into Manhattan. We were going to see Mastodon at Hammerstein Ballroom. And I think he knew Bill Kelleher from Mastodon and maybe was a roommate with him for a while. And anyway, as I'm driving into the city, the light bulb goes off. And I was like, I'm going to put together some kind of music something or other. And I'll take the proceeds of that and I'll contribute it to organizations that are helping guys that need help. And I can at least be a presence in social media and things like that to kind of say, hey, if you do this, this is who it's contributing to and this is how it's helping. So Jason and I meet up, and we're hanging in the bar beforehand, and I said, and for people that don't know who he is, he played guitar in Nirvana and bass in Soundgarden, and then played guitar for another couple years in Mindfunk before Mogadishu happened, and he got inspired in '94 to join the Army. So, was touching the scene pretty significantly. And he and I had been friends for a number of years and would meet up in New York and hang out from time to time. But the light bulb went off. I'm going to do this music thing. I'm going to see if Jason wants to be a part of it, because that just makes sense. And I'm literally getting ready to go see him in just a few minutes. And I'm going to ask him to see if he wants to do this. So we're at the bar, and I said, we're having conversation and everything else. Hey, man, I got this idea. I don't know what it's going to be. I have no idea. It could be just me and you playing guitars together. Like, I have no idea what it's going to be. I know you've been out of music for a long time. I know that you left with a bad taste in your mouth. Would you want to be a part of this? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. Hell yeah. So within a week or two, I started a social media page and was kind of trying to convey as much as you can through pictures and a few words that people will read. Here's what I'm trying to do. And it just kind of grew organically. So that was in like May of 2017. I think by July, I have a MARSOC officer. Hey man, I don't know what you got going on. I want to be a part of it. Like, do you play an instrument? I play bass. And I'm like, all right, well, where do you live? Raleigh. Okay. I come down to Raleigh, we hang out. I was like, man, A-list guy, like just awesome human being, phenomenal bass player, kindred spirit, all of that stuff. And it's like, yeah, man, you're the right guy. So it just started to grow.
Doesn't Jason play bass?
No, so he does guitar stuff with us, yeah.
And you?
Guitar, yeah. So that grows to a point that by the fall, A-list producer hits me up on social media, sends me a DM. Hey man, love what you got going on. I'd love to produce your album. And I'm like, who's this guy?
Right.
So I Google him and I'm like, holy shit, this is Bieber's producer. Celine Dion, Bad Bunny, Dua Lipa, like,
all right, so it's pretty up there.
The
Pretty
biggest,
up there.
yeah, the biggest. So then I don't even know who the artists are. It's like, who's this Bad Bunny guy? And I look that up, and it's like 498 kabillion like, holy crap. So I tell him a straight up lie. Sorry, Josh. Straight up lie, man. Yeah, we're ready to go. We've got 3 people in the band.
Right.
We're ready to go. And he's like, okay, my schedule, I've got like about a 2-week gap in here in January. If you guys can get out to LA, I'll book studio time. I'll find a place. We'll get a discounted rate. I'll do all this, pro bono kind of deal. And, man, we pulled it together, pulled it out of our ass, and got it across the finish
So
line.
who's the band at that point?
So the band was guy Brandon on drums, and who you probably know. Brandon on drums, Jason playing some guitar stuff. So Jason has always been, and Jason. Jason is Jason. He's as unplugged as anybody could possibly be. He's always been like a fringe type of member. So he adds things to the writing. He adds things in the studio, and it's these little nuanced things that make a huge difference in a song, but you wouldn't know it. Like if you just listen to the song, the meat and potatoes is there. He'll just add a little flavor to it. Tyson on bass, and Fred, who was an active duty E9 in the Air Force, and he's our singer. So that's where we are in the fall, and we have 4 rehearsals together. 4. We literally joke about this. We're like, we recorded the first album with about 16 hours of total playtime together.
That's crazy.
As a complete set, So yeah, we get to LA and we did a lot of. We didn't even have enough material. We had about 12 songs. We recorded 8. We recorded 10, and we worked that down to 8. But we didn't even know, like, what's our sound? What's
Right.
our vibe?
Yeah,
So
right.
until you start to kind of, like, these 4 songs go together.
Right.
These 3 kind of don't go. So we got to a point where we cut it to the stuff that we felt like fit together. Once we got that first album done, it's like, now I know our sound. I know what we are now. It's very easy for me to write more stuff of that vibe, of
Right.
that genre, because now I know what we are. But man, it was like pulling teeth to get that thing done.
So outside of Barry Manilow, who I love, by the way,
Yeah.
outside of Barry Manilow, who were your other influences like growing up?
So my folks I grew up in suburban Maryland, north side of DC, like Bethesda. And my folks took me and my sister to like a summer concert series at Merriweather Post Pavilion. And I saw, like as a very little kid, saw Chicago, the Beach Boys, another guy, Mac Davis, who was kind of like a country guy. There was 1 or 2 others. And I saw that stuff and it was like, this is what I want to do. When I look back, and it's funny because I had a guy ask me the other day through the DM, and he's like, do you feel like you missed out on a career in music and spent it, 20 years in the military, and you really should have been doing a career in music? And I was like, absolutely not. I didn't have the depth back then to actually write anything worth a damn. There are a lot of people that are struggling with a lot of trauma and stuff that are really talented people, and that all comes from somewhere. And in a way, it's like I had to go to the army to get trauma
Right. Get traumatized.
to be able to write.
I had a
and-
very accomplished musician once told me that, today's generation they've gone to these music schools, they've gone to art schools, and they're incredibly talented at playing their instruments. But the issue is they don't have quite the emotional maturity that they haven't really lived life.
Yeah. So people send me here's this like 9-year-old kid on the guitar just ripping it up. And it's like, okay, cool, write a song. I've always identified with musical influences. I've always identified with the people that wrote songs. And there are different, kind of camps that I subscribe to and like. But I look at a guy like Jerry Cantrell from Alice in Chains, and he's not the most pyrotechnic guy on the guitar, but man, can he write a song that fucking hits you
Yeah. Well,
in the gut,
you mentioned Mac Davis. I haven't heard that name for years. But he had he had some great songs that he wrote that other people performed, and
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah, songwriter is
Yeah.
another thing, performer is another thing.
So where did Silence and Light come from? Where did the name come from?
So the name, it was something that Tyson threw out to me, the bass player, MARSOC officer. He was like, I'm going to send you a picture. Sends me a picture. And I'm looking at it, and it was like the valley floor in Afghanistan, probably circa, 2015, 2016, something like that. And he's like, this was always the most surreal photo because it's like so serene and beautiful, but like the stuff that's out there
Right.
is deadly, and he goes, it reminds me of this poem called In Between the Silence and the Light. And so we started talking about the poem. Then he sent me the poem, and I started reading that. And I don't know how it came to be, but we just were kind of like, what about silence and light? And we Google it. And the only thing you could find was like maybe 3 Google entries about In Between the Silence and the Light. And that was about it. And anyway, so that's where it came from. It really didn't have any significant meaning. I liked it from the perspective that, like, I don't want to be like War Machine,
Right.
It's like so overdone, and like a name that makes you think of something. Like, what does this mean to you?
Right.
And people will say, like, to me it means this, and I don't know what it means. It just, I wanted it to be something that it's thought provoking.
Yeah.
You know, like what does it mean to you? I don't know. It can mean anything. Oh, it's like the silence before the bomb flash goes up. I'm like, no, it's not that. It's not that. But yeah, that's where it came from, though.
Yeah. And then in terms of like your band, like we've talked about your musical influences a lot, but in terms of your band, is there sort of a musical influence or musical influences that your band sort of draws from?
So I write all the music. I do some of the lyrics, and usually it's more about like, this is the vibe of the song. This is kind of what I was thinking it could be about. I don't want to put words in Fred's mouth or make him write or sing words that he's not good at singing. And so there's a lot of, define who writes a song. Like everybody's adding their own stuff, but it's kind of got to be in a box.
Right.
It's like you can't come in with some wicked Tool drum beat and it fit with something that's meant to be jangly nutshell kind of, you know what I mean? It's got to work together. So we've done a very good job of speaking the same language and saying, this is kind of what I'm feeling. People kind of know we're talented enough to kind of know what to put into something to make it sound right. And then we just start tweaking it. And then usually, I think like most bands, you put something down in the studio. That's not the way we rehearsed it 1,000 times or played it live even. And then you have to learn how you played it on the album.
Right.
Because you're like, wait, we tweaked that one part and we did this and changed this. And then you hear it and it comes out and you're like, man, I've been playing that wrong this time. But yeah, that's kind of how it comes to be. But like with this last album that released in June, it specifically came from a place in me. And I had been doing a lot of traveling down to Benning and hanging out with friends and stuff like that there, hanging out with current Ranger buddies and stuff like that. And it's a weird place. I spent 8 years there, and it was like the soundtrack of my life when I was there was Stone Temple Pilots and Nirvana and all of that stuff from that era, Soundgarden. And I didn't realize what an impact it made on me. Maybe not as a guitar player, but just as a human. First time I heard Smells Like Teen Spirit was low crawling down the hallway, in the Ranger barracks, and hearing that song, and it was like evil, and my team leader's cranking it, and wow, holy shit. And there was also this thing where life was very uncertain back then. Like you didn't know if you were going to be there. I'm like, will I make it through tomorrow?
Yeah.
Am I going to be here in 3 months? The guy that I was roommates with that said that he would never quit just jacked it in this morning, and he's packing his bags and moving down to the RFS platoon, and he's gone. And it was just a revolving door of people, guys getting hurt on jumps.
Yeah.
This guy's getting shoulder surgery, and then he's out of the Army, And I didn't realize what an impact it had on me. But this album is really, part of me wanted to call it 1991 because it really comes from there, man. Like every sound that you hear is something that was from that era. And it's not what do they call it? A concept album. It's not that. But it kind of is. It's kind of turned into that a little bit, where it's like a little bit of everything that really affected me and made an impression.
I mean, people will have to ultimately go and like listen to the album to understand what it is. But like, yeah, I mean, I hate to even put you on the spot to ask you, but like, what is that emotion? What is that place that came from?
Well, I mean, I think I just explained it to some degree. It was like uncertainty and despair, and also hope and aggression, and like all of those, every emotion that you could tap into at the time. Hey, you guys need to fight. Hey, one of our privates just got snatched down a weapons platoon.
Right.
You got to go rescue him.
Yeah.
It's all of that stuff. It's the driving around in and around Fort Benning on roads that I've driven thousands of times and feeling so completely removed from it because it's 30 years later or 26 years later or whatever it might be. It's kind of all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so it really was like this kind of, man, very accurate soundtrack of like all of my feelings and emotions of that time. And, you know, what does tomorrow bring? I don't know, but I'm going to keep going at it.
Machine gunning it.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can buy their albums. You also listen on Spotify, Silence in the Light. If you don't, you're not an American. I'm just going to put that out
hate
there.
the troops.
You hate the troops. You hate America. Listen, it's great music. I mean, I enjoy like.
Yeah, you're basically if you have Apple Music, like first of all, it's on every platform that anything that you'll get. You know, we have CDs. We've got there are people that still have a CD player in their truck and they don't have the ability to connect a device.
If we're old school, where should we go to get the CDs?
On our website.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you Google Silence and Light or you Google me, you're going to find everything that you need to know.
You can also get bomb-ass swag and T-shirts on their website.
The links will be down in the description of this video, by the way.
But I want to say this, and like there are a couple of things, and this is almost like the soundbite that goes in front of this whole thing. But
Sure.
the reason I'm doing what I'm doing and the reason that I started it was because I wanted to be, you know, the old adage of like Rangers lead the way and lead by example. It really is, I've lived all the stuff that anybody else can say that they've lived. And if I can figure out a way to do something that's healthy and positive and creative and gives back to the community that I love, if I can figure out a way to do it, anybody can do it. Just figure out what it is and, you know, and follow that dream. So I put myself out there to say that. It's not, I want to be a rock star riding around in limos or anything else. It's to say, I'm a real person. I lived all these things. I did all these things. And if I can do it, no matter what you face or what, you know, stuff is out there rattling around in your brain, if I can do it, you can do it. The music, like if you buy an album, great. It's just more royalty that we're contributing to places like Warrior's Heart, places like Marine Raider Foundation that do a lot of good stuff for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. If you stream it, you're still contributing. So like there's no reason why anybody can't get on to Spotify or Apple Music or Google Play or YouTube, or it's on every platform you'd normally get music. So anyway, we're taking all of those royalties and we're contributing those to
not knowing
those
how
organizations.
Like the Spotify, Google Play, things like that, Apple royalties work. Is it more beneficial and for? I mean, is it more beneficial if people like buy an album? Is it more beneficial?
Get the CD. Don't be a pussy. Get the CD.
And the plan is to do some vinyl here soon too, but
that would be amazing.
no, it's more lucrative. Royalties are more lucrative with purchases than they are with streams. Streaming, you have to hit a certain mark before it becomes actually like Metallica, lucrative.
Right.
Papa Roach, lucrative. You know, we could probably name artists, and at some point, it's like it's pennies. You know, so if we sell a song for 99 cents, Apple is taking 30 cents of that. The forget what the name is called, but the service that we use that does all the upload basically codifies everything, and it puts a GPC code on it, and that's how music is bought, and everything else is GPC code. We get, once a song is done, we end up with about 63 cents if you buy it. If you stream it, you know, who knows? We got to be in the thousands. We're like approaching 1 million streams on stuff. So
buy it.
Done.
Buy it.
If you don't want to buy it, stream it. And we made a decision way long ago. We were like, let's just sell CDs.
Yeah.
And we're like, I'd rather people just have access to the music.
Yeah.
And it's connected with a lot of people. There's 2 albums worth of really good stuff. It's only getting better. We'll be doing another EP here in a few months. So putting out just like a 3 or 4 song thing.
So this is what I recommend in order, to help the causes.
Buy it.
Is buy it.
Buy it.
But don't listen to the CD or don't listen to it to what you buy.
Get a hard copy.
Listen to it on Spotify so that it adds up every time.
Sure.
So buy it and then stream it.
Every little bit helps.
Yeah,
The other thing
absolutely.
is, recording albums isn't cheap.
No, it's not.
Mixing, mastering, you're talking about mastering a song is about $1,000 a song. So just mastering that album, which makes it the same whether you listen to it on a device or you listen to it in your headphones or you listen to it in your car. That's the thing that kind of makes everything sound okay, and no matter what platform. So that in itself is about $1,000 a song. So we had 12 tunes on this album. That's 12 G's just in mastering.
Right.
Mixing, maybe about the same. Studio time, hotels, food, all of that stuff is incredibly expensive. So if people buy merchandise, that's one of the ways that we can help recoup, and not even recoup. It's more like start to
Balance
sort
out.
of offset.
Yeah.
We've just kind of gotten to the point where it's like starting to pay for itself. And I view that as success from the beginning. Of like, if we can make enough selling merchandise, we play a show, we sell like $800 of merchandise. Like, okay, it starts to kind of help to offset some of those costs. But that's the way. If you want to contribute and help the band, that's one of the ways you can directly contribute is by buying merchandise.
What's I mean, you said that there's maybe an EP coming in the near future, but what do you see as the future for the band?
Definitely going to be playing a bunch of shows. So we've got one next week in Virginia Beach. We've got, I think, 2 or 3 lined up in Wilmington, Raleigh. But our goal is really to be like, we don't want to. There's a nice scream.
That's
Yeah.
just life around
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
neighborhood.
We don't want to get in a van and drive up and down the East Coast playing for 7 people on a
Right.
Thursday night.
Right.
Like now we do a lot of special events, and I've done a lot of one-off shows and things like that with different folks. Our first show was playing with Lenny Kravitz in front of about 5,000 people. So
Was that the
instantly it was kind of
the
like boom.
spy,
Yeah. So we did that, and we've done that I think 3 times. Play with Third Eye Blind, play with Old Dominion. We did like just an unplugged kind of acoustic set because we were like, their country, we're not. We don't want to come out and
Right.
be banging all over everything. So, but 2024 should be a lot of shows, and our goal is really to kind of get in and be like the act that opens for the Melvins when the Melvins play in Raleigh downtown in front of 2,000 people. We can bring in 100 extra people or something. That's kind of where we want to be.
And for people who are not watching this, so the information for
show notes too
in audio. Okay.
Questions for Brad.
Yeah.
There are many questions.
So
Well, questions.
Hopefully there's not just like one.
No.
No, there's a bunch.
many.
So check out
We will
Silence.
tax you. We will tax you, Brad.
It's fun.
silenceandlightmusic.com to buy the CD, to buy the swag. I've got my swag and I'm buying more. You have a really cool t-shirt that was out of stock when I went to order it last time.
It's back on now.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. So the issue with that was the screen printing. This is one of the things you learn about a band is business, man. It's like no, everything. Like this is Silence and Light
That's true.
Music
It's true.
Incorporated.
Yeah.
It's got to have like, am I paying taxes on the money that's coming in? Who's paying taxes on them? You have to figure out every aspect of this. Who's doing the design for the artwork? Where is this coming from? What font are we
I
using
have a
for
lot of
this
that
video?
same questions about this podcast. I think Dimitri should be paying taxes on this podcast.
You guys should hook up with Invader Girl for some of your swag.
Yeah, we've done. I hooked up with her like 4 years
Really?
ago.
Oh, did you really?
Have you seen this?
Yeah, she's rad, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I started promoting her stuff all over the
She's so
place.
amazing.
Probably like 4 or 5 years
Yeah,
ago.
no, we're super happy to
So did
have
you guys
an
do-
original work of hers here
Yeah.
in the studio.
I've
Did
got
you,
a.
did you guys,
Go ahead.
please?
I've got a print that she did. I like kind of gave her some guidance on it, and she did one that was fucking amazing.
That's awesome. Have you guys done any swag with her yet?
No.
Let me know when you do, because I'm all about it.
Okay.
So, all right. What is this? Baker Hitch, thank you very much. Would you let Andrew Tate on your soft team?
You're gonna have to ask the other Jack Murphy about that question. I am the reporter Jack Murphy, not the masculinity expert Jack Murphy. So, look, I'm the real Giga Chad. That guy is just a fraud. But you're gonna have to go in and talk to him about Andrew Tate. I can't answer that, and I don't think Brad can either.
Yeah.
I don't know who he is.
Good for you. You're a better man for it.
Alejandro Ranger 275. Thanks very much. When you got to the unit, were you disappointed by the lack of dirt bikes with rockets like the Chuck Norris movies? Gotta ask the real questions.
No, definitely not disappointed. Yeah, definitely not disappointed. He was there. He was there to greet me.
Chuck gave you the you son of a bitch.
It's funny because I never saw that movie before, you know. I think at some point in the Rangers I saw it, but I never saw it before joining the military. And to be honest, I don't know when I told a recruiter that's what I wanted to do, I don't even know
where did that come
Where
from?
did you know
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Because it definitely wasn't a thing.
When I think of a secret unit that has motorcycles with rockets, I don't think I think Megaforce with the flying motorcycles. But that's way before your time.
That's way before my time, Dave.
Do you remember Megaforce?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do remember Chuck with a dirt bike and firing these mini rockets off of his dirt bikes. And
Yeah.
there's huge gasoline explosions.
Super lightweight technical.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, Alejandro 275, thank you. Geardo question. I saw that you play orange amps. What made you choose them over others? What guitars and effects are you running? Thanks for coming on, dude.
That's a lot. Let's see. So orange are no longer. I haven't been playing those for a few years. So there's probably some Google images and stuff like that have those. But I'm currently playing Bogner's, and I probably won't switch or deviate from those. It's the first amp that I've found that has a amazing clean and dirty channel. And it also, I had some Friedman JJs, which this guy will probably know what those are, but it sounded I felt like I sounded like somebody else. And the Bogner's are the first amps that I played that are it feels like it sounds like me. In terms of effects, I'm pretty basic. So I've got some stuff that I'll use to color stuff, but mainly that's just for live shit. I've got a bunch of vintage pedals that I'll use in the studio, but they're not roadworthy. I'm not going to step on those half lit on a stage jumping around, it'll break them. So I'll use them in the studio, and then I've got Rugged Eyes, Boss stuff that I'll use on my pedal board for live stuff. In terms of guitars, I'm kind of all in on Fender Strats, and I modify all those, or I buy custom shop models, and they all have the same pickup in them, like a Motor City Afwayu. I use basically they all sound the same. So, and then I've got other stuff that, I've thinned the guitar herd considerably, but I've got other stuff that I'll use to record. Telecasters or Gibson Les Paul specials, or stuff like that. But as far as just playing in the comfortability, I'm definitely a Fender Strat-ish guy.
If you had an unlimited budget, has there been a guitar that's come up for auction or that's been sold that you would have been that's it?
The only one that, so interestingly, I think David Gilmour's Black Strat sold for $3.4 million at auction.
No big deal.
Yeah, no big whoop. Jimi Hendrix's Star Spangled Banner Woodstock Strat would be the one that I would want.
That would be the one.
And I would play the fuck out of it. It's not staying in.
Really?
Yeah, there's no way I'm letting that thing sit in a case. And I think the people that buy those are investors.
Yeah.
They're not. They're just looking
Yeah,
for
yeah.
it to. Which, this is kind of like a crazy sidebar, and I don't know like what our time is here or
We're
anything,
good.
but I'm a blabber. So
Whatever the fuck.
Yeah, we're good.
You're like, there's 8 people watching, so it doesn't
No,
matter.
there's.
I have this argument. It's always a band argument with like, how long is David Gilmour's strap worth $3.4 million? Like, at some point, nobody cares about David Gilmour because our pop culture isn't feeding that machine anymore. Nobody's listening to that. So is it kind of like, then they'll bring up the counterpoint is like, well, I'm sure if Beethoven's piano bench was for sale, that it would fetch a lot of money. Well, like, sure, but is Beethoven correlate to David Gilmour, or is that just only have value now while there are people that are rich from that era that can support investing in and buying that? I just can't think of another instrument where it'd be like, pick your guy, whoever
Yeah,
it might be.
I mean, but but of every generation, they're going to be like aficionados, and of
Sure.
those aficionados, and also, and I was going to say, of those aficionados, some get rich, but it's also that some rich people, as they're like, what do I spend my money on, sort of develop taste too. I mean,
Sure.
like Superman #1 went for $5.3 million, right? And it's not that there are a ton of people that are crazy about Superman, like they know
Yeah.
him from the movies, but you have to be somebody who, one, has the money, and two, wants to collect, I guess.
Yeah. And willing to spend above what somebody else is willing to spend so that you own it.
Absolutely. So that it's in your house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally get it. I just feel like there's a time limit on the value of something like David Gilmour's.
Right.
Kurt Cobain's acoustic guitar that he played the Unplugged show with, and his cardigan that he wore during it, and there was like something else that sold for like $7 million. And again, it's like, okay, if you're a person that has that kind of income, cool.
Sure.
And you're a fan.
Sure.
But I don't know if that'll still be as notable in 20 years because
Yeah.
the music probably isn't going to be around the same way, and we'll have moved on
Right.
generations by then,
But there will also always be, like, there are cycles too, and there are always people like Kurt Cobain, Prince, like I don't think their stuff, they will always have a following no matter
Sure.
what generation.
Yeah.
And people in that generation, some of them will have money, and to think that I'm the person of my generation, when I'm 80, my kids and grandkids may not care about this.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Jackson, thank you very much. What was the difference in culture like between the squadrons during your time in the unit?
That's like anywhere in the military. Like, 3rd platoon sucks, 1st platoon's the best. It's always different. So what I've noticed in terms of culture between different organizations is like, it comes down to like how small you want to reduce it. When we had Ranger Rendezvous every year or every 2 years, it'd be like 375 is the best. But once you guys left, it would be like, well, B company's better than
Right.
A and C. And then in B company, it's like, well, 3rd platoon's the platoon to be in. And then, well, in 3rd platoon, 2nd, 3rd, and weapon squads suck. So 1st squad is, what I mean? It's
Right.
like,
Everything is a
so,
competition.
yeah,
right?
it just wickers it down.
Yeah, and you have nicknames, like you make up nicknames for the other companies, for the platoons, like,
Yep.
yeah.
Hate all the way around.
Yeah.
Unless, it's just everybody's got a band
But
together.
it's good
at
to
some
have a
point.
nemesis, like that kind of like competition keeps you sharp.
Absolutely.
Alejandro, thank you very much, buddy. Same question I got, Pat Mack. What bands are you listening to and have on your playlist?
Good question.
What
Okay.
bands up and coming should peeps be on the lookout for?
Let's see. So I'm in the middle of doing a lot of writing. And when I do a lot of writing, I try not to listen to stuff that I feel like is going to color my palette. So I would love to be listening to certain things like Alice in Chains and STP is probably like, that's my been my go-to for a number of years. And I feel like I like stuff that's diverse. I like stuff that the guitar on this song doesn't sound the same as the guitar on that song. And there's an acoustic song. This one's got acoustic and electric, and everything is a little different. Bands like Aerosmith did that. Not every song sounds exactly the same. Kill 'Em All, Metallica's first album, same guitar, same settings, same sound, every song. And that works for that. AC/DC, same kind of thing. So I like stuff that's a little more diverse, song to song on an album. But I am listening currently to a ton of 70s, like not even, I guess it would be like pop, 70s pop. And when I'm not listening to that, I'm listening to new wave.
Nice.
And I was a fan of that stuff when it came out back in the early 80s, but it doesn't color, when I pick up a guitar and start like jamming a heavy riff, and it's not like, well, that was kind of like Love, Hate, Love, or that was kind of like this, and it keeps me away from that. So
You're not adding a synthesizer to your band.
no.
What? No synthesizer?
No keyboards.
Yeah.
They'll be like, what Silence and Light's third album had keyboards on
Yeah.
it?
How tough is that as a musician? Because, one of the things you say is that you like switching it up where not every song, where it's not the same guitar, it's not the same sound, but also like some of the fans, it's like, this is nothing like their other stuff. Like, I like this sound of Silence and Light, not,
It's interesting. So like releasing this album, and now because we have multiples on, like, we're verified artists on all the platforms, we can see all of our analytics and everything else. And our first album is actually streaming better than our second album, although our second album is by far better in terms of maturity, in terms
quality.
of everything. It sounds better. It's way more, but where it falls. So it's like when you go to our page, the first one that pops up is the old album. Mm-hmm. And it's like, we're getting more streams on older songs than we're getting on newer songs.
Yeah.
And not because they're not good. I don't think it's because people don't like them, or there's such a difference. There is a change from 1 to 2, and the stuff that I'm writing for 3. Like, I've already got 8 songs pretty much done, probably 8, 10 songs pretty much done. We just want to do like a 3-song EP just to throw something out. We also have a goal to like legit old school record, meaning to tape, live tracking, just like Zeppelin did, just like everybody else did. We did that on some stuff on this second album. And we also took all of our Pro Tools digital recordings and kind of came up with the idea of like running those to a tape machine and then bouncing them back
That's
into
really
digital.
cool.
So it gave it like the analog warmth. Tape affects the way stuff sounds.
Yeah.
So if you listen to Angus Young's guitar live, it does not sound like it sounds on the album. It gets compressed on the tape, which makes it sound a little heavier, which makes it sound a little more distorted, like all that stuff. It's super geeky, but we want to live track all of our scratch tracks, and then we'll overdub stuff and things like that, but then bounce it to Pro Tools.
Yeah.
And then we can kind of do the cut and paste and scalpeling. Like, this kick drum is a little off. It's a millisecond fast or whatever. That's the genius of Pro Tools is like, the second verse, you fucked up all the way through. We're just going to copy and paste the third verse and drop it in. It's just like, that's the way stuff is recorded now.
Yeah.
And it's all on a grid. And it's like the music doesn't change. The beat doesn't change. It's like, everything's like a machine. So that's that whole feel thing.
Yeah.
So this album, none of it's on a grid. Like, it's very much, live.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Jackson, thank you very much. Did you enjoy selection and OTC? What was your most favorite moment?
Loved it. Every moment of it.
Looking back, what was your most favorite moment looking back on your time during the training process?
Let's see, without fully answering the question, because I don't think that I really can. Selection, I had a blast. And again, there's a tangible selection and there's an intangible selection. And timing and luck are as much of a factor as any skill. And I think when we live those things, we tend to say, it's me, it's skill. I did this. I made it happen, right? That's
Sure.
exactly. That's what like boosts our confidence and everything else. Looking back, it's like, dude, I was one step away from falling off the side of this fucking thing and breaking my ankle and everything else. There's so much luck involved. My OTC class, we had a guy killed in a helo crash. So like, the shit is no joke. This isn't I'm going and doing paintball in a room. It's serious business.
Right.
And from day one, I think when I passed selection and I got selected, the weight and gravity of the situation hit me. And that was, now it counts. Like, now I'm just starting. And then you get through the training course and you're like, now I got to go prove myself to my team.
Right.
So there is no sense of accomplishment. And I'm sure you get that even in the Rangers, in Special Forces, anywhere. It's like you're constantly in a point of having to prove yourself.
Right.
You know, it never stops. So you never like, oh yeah, man, I made it. Yeah, I'm great now. I think after you've been in the building a certain number of years and you're like, whatever they throw at me, I can handle. Okay, cool. You know, I'm amongst, you know, the tribe now.
Yeah.
Maybe it levels off a little bit, but you know, it's no joke.
Joe's gotcha. Thank you very much. With your past experience at RRD, did the unit try to push you out of C Squadron into the operational support troop and do more clandestine stuff?
I don't know what he's talking about. But
Okay.
No.
Clayton Jensen, thanks very much, buddy. I don't see a question there. So if you have a question, throw it in the chat and I'll check back. And good to see you, man. Alen Paramari, thank you very much. From a Kurdish American, did you ever work with Kurdish Soft? What did you think of them? Thank you for your service and long live Kurdistan and America.
No experience.
Adam White, thank you very much, buddy. Great seeing you last week. Great show, gentlemen. Brad, any chance you opened for President Bush at Fort Hood in 2005? Please permit the random question, but if so, I was a young private in your audience.
Can you confirm or deny?
No, I did not.
Alejandro, thank you very much, buddy. Not a question. Thank you for writing Look After Me. That and Falling to Pieces by Faith No More. Some songs just really speak to the heart.
Yeah, man. That Look After Me was, I'll talk about that one real quick.
Yeah.
That tune was written as a goodbye to all the people that I never got a chance to say goodbye to. And, you know, you guys know the deal, but when you're deployed and somebody is killed, like, you're still deployed. And the memorial service and a lot of times the funeral and all that stuff is happening. You're still overseas doing your thing. And I feel like I wanted to write something that was just, this is my goodbye to all the people that I never had a chance to. So we were in the studio with Josh Goodwin, who, and I never completed the thought on him, but he was a Marine. He served 4 years in the Marine Corps. So that was his connection to the military when he reached out and said, hey, I want to produce your album. Anyway, that tune was originally written not to be an acoustic song. And we played it a couple times, we recorded it, and he goes, hey man, something's not fucking working. You need to figure it out, but I want you to go in there tomorrow and do this on acoustic. And I was like, okay, no pressure here. You know, we finished at like 2 a.m. after slamming however many beers and smoking weed and doing all kinds of crazy shit. And anyway, on the way to the studio, I got something in my head and I was like, don't talk to me or I'll lose it. You know, I need to go in. I think I've got it. And anyway, went in and started playing it. And it was like, record. And I think I recorded that on like a 1948 Martin acoustic, which, you know, priceless kind of guitar. But yeah, super cool song. So we stripped it totally down. And sometimes when we play it live, usually we'll pull out stools, get a little bit soft, everybody up. We're going to have a toast for our friends, and we'll talk about it a little bit. And other times we'll play it the original way, which is kind of like heavy and and everything else, but it's just kind of a fun song,
Yeah.
even though it's a heavy subject.
Yeah.
I've had buddies that are like, man, I was in the gym and was on the treadmill and this song came on. And I was like, I was like tearing up. It's a heavy tune, man. Fred did a really good job of writing the lyrics for it. I mean, amazing job writing the lyrics for it.
So when you come up with a song like that, because like you said earlier, like songwriting is a complicated process, but when you were playing the music for that, or when you're creating that, did you know what that song was about, and then you conveyed that to him? Or
it's got a vibe. Like for me, music has a vibe, and it could be heavy, it could be happy. Like you listen to Van Halen, man, it's like, dude, let's break out some 6-packs and go troll skank, and you know, like that's what it's about. And it just has a vibe. So it's very much good time party. And I've always been attracted to the stuff like Alice in Chains, where it's like, man, this shit's got a dark side to it, and there's something there. And you know, there's also something very therapeutic in about getting that out, you know?
Yeah. Dee, do you know if we have anything on Patreon?
No,
Nothing? Okay. So again, silenceandlightmusic.com. Buy the CD.
The links are down in the description.
Yep. Buy the CD.
Go check them out.
Buy the swag. It all goes to a good cause, and also helps them pay for their music and keep it all, keeps it all going.
Yeah.
Like you said, like it's not a cheap endeavor, and
Nope.
Brad, what else have you got for us? Here we are at the end of the show.
Here we are. So tell me about how when you joined the military, we can go.
Let's start over.
Yeah, we
All
can
right,
go.
let's
We
go
can go
6-hour
Jack,
marathon.
you're
start from
Well, we do that on our
250-page novel or book.
No, I appreciate you guys having me in the outlet and everything else, and anything I can do to help.
We appreciate you coming in, and anything we can do to help. And we will definitely not only clip the piece about going to war in the Philippines, but we'll also clip like some of the music piece, so that it does get, we want you, so it gets its own standout. Like we want.
We'll definitely clip you out of context to make it seem the worst possible case scenario.
Yeah.
No. We're there for it.
Yeah.
It's cool.
No, but we deeply appreciate you coming in, because it's like you say, like we've talked about Mogadishu, we've talked about other stuff, and like you say, it's not necessarily that you want to talk about this stuff all the time.
Sure.
And so we appreciate you taking the time to do that, and also, I mean, we wish you guys the best of luck with the music. I mean, it's great music. It's it's great music. So everybody listen, or
Stream it.
You're dead to us.
Stream it, download it, buy the CD.
Yeah.
It's
get the
interesting.
t-shirts.
We've like fought tooth and nail. You know the deal, but like people in certain industries definitely aren't friendly or helpful. And so for us, it's like it's an uphill battle. We do better than probably 98% of actual music that's being released.
Spill some tea, Brad.
Yeah.
Who is it that hates the troops? Who is it? Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's one of those things where it's like we brought in a publicist this last go around, and she was like, first of all, publicists like won't take you on if they don't believe in your story.
Yeah.
And we brought in a publicist. I got to compete out of 12 like A-list publicists. I got to compete like 8 of them, because they were all like, we're interested, we've got too much, whatever. They all wanted, yes, I got ties with here, blah, 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 blah. Nobody picks up on anything. Nobody picked up on a single story, And you're just like, well, thanks for the help, Like, you're going to write about Corey Taylor and Slipknot and, the same clickbait on every, you know what I mean?
Right.
So we've done this ourselves. We built a brand. You go to Google, we're all over everything there. It's taken a lot of years and a lot of hard work.
So I know we've talked about it a couple times, but like, no shit, where can people go to find you? Instagram, Spotify,
Instagram,
Bandcamp,
Silence and Light
where is it?
Official, Brad Thomas Official. If you Google Silence and Light, we're going to pop up there. I think our music pops up there. If you type it in YouTube, you're going to find it. If you type it on Apple Music, Spotify, any of that, you're going to find it. Google Play, Amazon Music, we're everywhere there. So all you have to do is Google it, or look where you'd normally get music.
Okay, so we're gonna do Silence and Light hates Republicans. Clip Silence Lights hates Democrats. You can clip both of those. It'll create buzz. You'll get the hate clicks and the people that are siding with you. Yeah,
I'm not gonna even go over there.
yeah. So if you clip both of those, no, but Silence Light bites the heads off live bats in concert.
Yeah.
Clip that. You need the controversy these days, I guess.
Yeah, it's insane, man. You would just think it's a great story. These dudes are we're going out of pocket on this.
Yeah.
This is me throwing 35 G's of my personal money into something just to release an album and recouping a quarter of that, from royalties and merchandise and stuff like that, and then doing T-shirt collaborations and all that kind of shit.
They can find your tour schedule on your website.
Yep.
Yeah, shows and everything else. But social media is the best place, and we do some on Facebook. It's just such a hassle. And Instagram, it's I can post a video on there and I've got 55,000 views, and then I go to Facebook and it's just
Yep. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So aside from the music, Silence Light, is there anything else that you're working on personally that you want to plug, promote, or talk about?
Probably too early to do the promotion thing. It might be something that
Come on, Brad.
next year.
Come on.
Well, it kind of ties into the thing I was talking about, trying to figure out this podcast thing. And I don't want to be a podcast. I don't necessarily have the bandwidth.
Come on, Brad. We're all here. We're all here. You're in the trust tree. You're in the trust tree.
In the net.
We were in the nest with the baby birds.
What if she's wearing, tighty whities?
Is it a thong? What color is it? What color is? We don't know. We want to ask.
I'm a part of a documentary that Ridley Scott's doing that'll come out next year.
Okay.
I think it's going to be a Netflix thing, like a 4-part, 5-part thing.
Cool.
It's about Mogadishu.
Cool.
And I was able to kind of insert some creative stuff into that. I'm not a producer or anything else, but kind of working with the producer to hey, have you thought about this aspect? Have you thought about some of these types of things, and connected him with certain people. And I was hoping from the beginning that it wouldn't be the same people that have been on everything else. And it's not. So that should be a pretty interesting thing, but it's not ready for, it's happening, it's moving forward, but they're just not filming yet.
Brad, if you want to continue your project with the podcast, we'd be happy to support you.
Yeah.
But if not, we'll be happy to support you either way.
We'll loan you studio space. We'll loan you D.
Yeah. We had it. So there's a dude that I'm buddies with, John Waters, and you can look him up on social media. But he's got the Afterburn podcast, and he's a former F-16
I think
guy.
I've heard of it.
He's got a huge following. So he was I want to do something with you, and that's kind of where this thing started. And then I started talking with the Ranger buddy, and we kind of started to sort things out. And the plan was we would launch it off of his, just as here's an initial 3 parts. Now go get it here in its own thing, and it would have seen a couple 100,000 people like that.
Yeah.
So there was also talk about. Maybe a company that makes coffee would be, interested in helping out. And I was I don't want them having anything to do with this.
Yeah.
So I don't want anybody telling me what creatively or any of that stuff. And that's kind of how I got to the point of it being a podcast.
Yeah.
I would love to do it.
Yeah.
I really would. And the thought that I had on it was that this would be like a serial. So this Mogadishu thing would be one part, but then I got all kinds of people that I'm friends with that were in 9/11.
Right.
What kind of stories about 9/11 can we hear? Not there I was, the buildings were falling, but all the behind the scenes stuff. And we could do one about Panama. We could do one about, but you could start tapping into, once you become a thing, you could start tapping in and doing other stuff. That was my idea for it.
Yeah.
And, so somebody was like, dude, you need to pitch it to, these people. And it was like, I don't know.
No.
I
I hope you'll do it.
Yeah. Only got so much time,
Well, if there's any way we can support you, even if you do it on another podcast platform, because a lot of those, there are a lot of podcasts out there that have a huge platform, much bigger than ours, and we'll plug you no matter where you launch it, and we're happy to help.
Okay, cool. Well, like I said, if it does, it would basically be at the end of 2024 probably.
Yeah.
And I think there was a lot of momentum and just kind of emotions and stuff like that was gearing up towards the 30th.
Sure.
And we started talking about it, and it was like the timing would be great. There's going to be other stories, kind of piggyback off that stuff, and now it's like, I don't know. But I would be interested in doing it. It just,
No, I hope you will.
Yeah, me too. I don't think Clayton ever said anything. So
final thoughts, Brad, Dave.
No, I'm
good.
I'm good, man.
Okay. We'll see you guys on Friday with Pete Blaber, and that's it. That's the show.
Yep.
Sweet.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Be good.
We'll see you guys next time.